Fake it till you make it has become one of the most popular pieces of advice in today's times. It sounds like the ultimate shortcut to confidence and success. Don't feel ready? Just act like you are. Unsure what you're doing? Pretend until it works out. This catchy mantra shows up everywhere, from job interviews and stage performances to dating tips. The idea is straightforward. If you behave like the person you want to become, eventually you will become them. But beneath its appeal, this advice quickly becomes complicated. At its core, the phrase encourages people to adopt the behaviors, mindset, or appearance of success before they've actually achieved it. That could mean dressing professionally, even if you're not confident, or using assertive body language in a presentation, even if you're nervous. It's a form of behavioral rehearsal. In small doses, it can help. Acting calm during a stressful meeting might help you become calmer. Mimicking a more experienced coworker might accelerate learning. But the danger starts when the act becomes a mask. Faking competence without the skills to back it up can lead to mistakes, or worse, burnout. In professions where stakes are high, like surgery or engineering, pretending to know what you're doing isn't harmless. Studies on imposter syndrome show that people who fake it too long often feel detached from their achievements. They succeed on paper, but privately feel like frauds. There's also a difference between learning by doing and pretending to be someone you're not. Growth comes from practicing skills, making mistakes, and building confidence over time, not from putting on a performance every day. In the long run, real progress is more sustainable than manufactured confidence. And the line between helpful rehearsal and harmful self-deception isn't always clear, but it matters. Never give up. This is one of those kind of advice that shows up everywhere, in graduation speeches, on motivational posters, and in the final minutes of sports movies. The message is clear. If you just keep pushing, success will come. And for certain situations, that persistence really does matter. Learning a new skill, building a career, recovering from a setback, these all take time and resilience. But as a one-size-fits-all rule, never give up can be misleading. Not all paths are worth sticking to. Sometimes quitting is actually the smart choice. There's a well-known psychological trap called the sunk cost fallacy. It's the idea that the more time, money, or effort we've already spent on something, the harder it is to walk away, even if it's clearly not working. People stay in failing business ventures because they've already invested years. Or they stick with degrees they no longer care about because they're almost done. The more you've given, the more pressure you feel to see it through, even when the payoff no longer makes sense. The problem is, effort alone doesn't guarantee results. Sticking with something just because you started it can waste resources and delay better opportunities. It's not always about grinding harder. Sometimes it's about recognizing when a change is needed. There's a difference between giving up too soon and knowing when to redirect your energy. Smart quitting isn't laziness. It's a form of strategy. It means recognizing dead ends, cutting losses, and making room for something that might work better. Never give up sounds inspiring, but real progress depends on more than determination. It depends on perspective, the ability to tell the difference between a challenge worth pushing through and a path worth leaving behind. Be yourself. Everyone has heard the advice, be yourself. It's often the first thing people say when you're facing something stressful, like a job interview, a first date, or a big presentation. It sounds simple and reassuring. Just show up as who you truly are, and things will fall into place. But when you think about it, this advice can feel more confusing than comforting. How do you be yourself when you naturally act differently around different people? How do you stay true to who you are when you're constantly growing and changing? Most of us adjust our behavior depending on the situation. You're not the same at work as you are with close friends. And that doesn't mean you're being fake, it means you're adaptable. Human behavior shifts with context, yet that doesn't change your core identity. Your tone, body language, or sense of humor may vary, but you're still you. The problem with Be Yourself is that it treats identity like a fixed, unchanging thing, like there's only one true version of you to protect at all costs. In reality, personality is flexible. People grow, pick up new habits, change opinions, and learn different ways to interact with the world. Telling someone to just be yourself can trap them in a narrow version of who they think they should be. It can also discourage trying new things. Someone practicing assertiveness for the first time might feel inauthentic. But growth often begins with uncomfortable experiments. Exploring new behaviors doesn't betray your identity, it expands it. Being yourself isn't about locking into a permanent version of who you are. It's about knowing your values, being honest, and making space for change. The goal isn't to freeze yourself in place, but to keep discovering who you can become, even if that person looks different from who you started as. No risk, no reward. This advice promises boldness that will unlock your dreams. It sounds simple. If you don't step out of your comfort zone, you'll never get ahead. But the truth about risk-taking is much more nuanced than just diving in and hoping for the best. Taking a risk means doing something uncertain, starting a business, changing careers, moving to a new place, or speaking up when it's hard. The idea behind it is clear. No risk, no reward. Playing it safe can mean missed chances and future regrets. Yet not all risks are created equal. Glorifying risk without considering your situation ignores important factors like your responsibilities, resources, and timing. Some risks aren't brave, they're reckless. What separates smart risk-taking from harmful gambles is preparation. A good risk is calculated. It involves weighing possible outcomes, planning for setbacks, and reducing unnecessary harm. For example, before quitting a stable job to launch a business, someone might save money, build a plan, and test their idea. That kind of risk is thoughtful, not impulsive. Psychologists call this intelligent risk-taking. It means understanding both the dangers and the opportunities, while honestly knowing how much uncertainty you can handle. People respond differently. Some thrive on pressure, others don't. The goal isn't to avoid risk or chase it blindly. Growth, change, and learning almost always come with uncertainty. What truly matters is how you face that uncertainty. Taking risks with awareness and strategy is what leads to real progress and meaningful rewards. Follow your passion. Many people believe that building a career means finding a single passion and following it relentlessly. It's a neat story. Discover what you love, then dedicate your life to it. But real-life career journeys are rarely that simple or straightforward. For starters, not everyone has one clear passion. Interests can be varied and shift over time. Waiting for that perfect calling to magically appear can create pressure and frustration, making you feel like you're falling behind if you haven't found the one. Liking something doesn't always mean you'll be good at it either. Take photography, for example. You might love taking pictures, but find it challenging to make a living from it. And even when a hobby turns into a job, the pressures of deadlines, clients, and finances can turn enjoyment into stress. There's also the reality of opportunity. Some passions align better with job markets than others. Someone fascinated by ancient coins may find limited career options, while a passion for data analysis could open many doors. This imbalance means that following passion alone isn't always practical. A more effective approach is what some call passion through practice. Instead of waiting for passion to strike fully formed, start by developing skills in areas that genuinely interest you. As your competence and confidence grow, so often does your passion. Ultimately, building a fulfilling career involves more than just passion. It requires balancing interests with skill development, seizing opportunities, and staying adaptable. Rather than chasing an elusive passion, it's often wiser to cultivate it gradually along the way. Everything happens for a reason. A car swerves, a job offer falls through, someone you trust walks away. In the moment, it feels senseless, like life is just tossing events at random. But soon after, people start telling stories. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was the universe closing one door so another could open. We crave patterns, explanations, some thread to tie it all together. This is where a popular idea quietly steps in. The belief that every event, no matter how painful, has a deeper purpose. It doesn't ask for proof. It just soothes. And for many, that comfort is enough. But here's the catch. Not every event carries a hidden message. A child gets sick. A business collapses. A natural disaster strikes. Sometimes, bad things happen without any larger narrative. The human brain, however, doesn't like gaps. When randomness enters our lives, we instinctively reach for meaning. Psychologists call this pattern-seeking behavior, and it's deeply rooted in how we cope. There's a difference between making meaning and assuming meaning was already there. You can choose to grow after something awful. You can learn, adapt, recover. But that's not the same as saying it was meant to be. One is an active response. The other is a passive assumption. The danger lies in that passivity. Believing everything happens for a reason can lead to inaction, staying in toxic relationships, delaying decisions, or waiting for life to sort itself out. It can also cause people to rationalize injustice or blame victims, trying to fit every tragedy into a tidy moral arc. Not everything is part of a grand plan, but that doesn't mean you're powerless. Meaning isn't always found. Sometimes it's built, deliberately, in the aftermath. And that's a different kind of strength. Don't worry, you're young, you're overwhelmed, uncertain, maybe even falling behind, and someone says it like it's a magic fix. It sounds comforting at first, like there's more time than you think. But over time, that reassurance can quietly become a trap. The phrase suggests that youth comes with endless opportunity, that mistakes don't matter yet, that major decisions can wait, and that urgency is something for later. And while it's true that most people in their teens or 20s have time to grow, learn, and change, that doesn't mean every delay is harmless. Putting off action because you're young often leads to a false sense of security. A 22-year-old might delay starting a project or learning a skill, assuming there's time to figure it out. But the world moves quickly. Careers shift, opportunities pass, and habits start to lock in earlier than we realize. Research shows that many foundational patterns, from financial decisions to emotional coping, begin taking shape well before 30. There's also the problem of comparison. When young people are told not to worry, while also being shown success stories of peers achieving massive things in their 20s, it creates a disconnect. You're told to relax, but surrounded by pressure to perform. Don't worry, you're young can be good advice in the right context. If you're panicking over not having everything figured out, it helps to zoom out. But when it's used to dismiss real stress, delay effort, or ignore meaningful decisions, it stops being helpful. Being young is not a guarantee of future success. It's a window, not a pause button. And how you use that window matters more than how far away the deadline feels. Believe you can do it. You've seen it written on posters, heard it in pep talks, and watched it play out in motivational videos. The idea that belief is the first step to success. If you think you can do it, you're already halfway there, or so the logic goes. But while confidence plays a real role in performance, belief alone doesn't guarantee results. At its core, believe you can do it is about mindset. When someone believes a task is within reach, they're more likely to try, persist, and recover from setbacks. Psychologists call this self-efficacy, the belief in your ability to execute a specific task or goal, and research backs it up. People with higher self-efficacy tend to take more initiative, handle failure better, and improve faster. But this idea gets misused when belief is treated as a shortcut. Confidence without preparation can create a false sense of readiness. A person might overestimate their ability to handle something, like giving a speech or passing an exam, and skip the work that actually builds competence. There's also a social angle. In some environments, people are constantly told to just believe, without being given the tools, feedback, or support to improve. This can create pressure to act confident even when they feel lost, leading to frustration or burnout. Belief is not the cause of success. It's more like fuel. It helps you push through resistance, but only if the engine, your skills, your effort, your strategy is working. Telling someone to believe in themselves is only helpful if it comes with a realistic understanding of what the goal requires. Confidence works best when it's earned, not by magic, but by preparation. The kind that makes belief feel less like a leap and more like a step you're ready to take. Do what makes you happy. Some advice sounds harmless until you try to apply it. Do what makes you happy seems simple enough. A reminder to choose joy, follow your interests, and avoid what drains you. But in real life, the line between happiness and responsibility isn't always so clear. The phrase assumes that happiness is easy to identify and even easier to chase. But happiness is a moving target. What feels good now might not hold up long term. Watching TV might make you happy tonight, but not if it replaces sleep, deadlines, or your health. Eating cake might bring joy in the moment, but not if it's your default coping strategy. Do what makes you happy also ignores the trade-offs. Sometimes what makes you happy clashes with what makes others happy. Or it requires money, time, or freedom that not everyone has. A person might love painting, but can't afford to quit their day job. Another might enjoy traveling, but has caregiving responsibilities at home. There's also a difference between short-term pleasure and long-term satisfaction. Psychologists call it the difference between hedonic and eudaimonic happiness. One is about feeling good now, the other is about finding meaning, growth, and purpose over time. And often, the things that bring long-term satisfaction don't feel fun in the moment. Studying, exercising, showing up when it's hard. These might not spark joy immediately, but they build a deeper sense of fulfillment. The idea behind the phrase isn't useless. It's a push against living on autopilot or ignoring your own needs. But as advice, it oversimplifies something complex. Doing what makes you happy isn't just about asking what feels good. It's about understanding what kind of life you're really trying to build and what trade-offs you're willing to make to get there. Yolo, a late-night impulse trip, a risky text, a skipped deadline for a once-in-a-lifetime concert, all justified with one quick phrase, YOLO. Short for you only live once, it's become a cultural shortcut for chasing experiences, even if they come with consequences. At its core, the idea is simple. Life is short, so make the most of it. On the surface, it encourages spontaneity, bold decisions, and freedom from regret. And in many ways, it's a useful reminder. People do get stuck in routines. They overthink. They delay goals. Yolo steps in as a push to act while there's still time. But when taken to the extreme, the idea turns into an excuse. It shifts from make life meaningful to ignore consequences, spending recklessly, quitting jobs without a plan, neglecting relationships. All can be justified under the umbrella of living in the moment. The message becomes about maximizing thrills, not long-term value. There's also a contradiction. If you only live once, wouldn't that be a reason to protect your health, build strong relationships, and create stability? Yet YOLO often gets used to justify the opposite, burning out, taking dangerous risks, or putting off responsibility. The more balanced interpretation is this: yes, you only get one life, which makes how you spend your time matter. But not every good moment has to be extreme. It can mean calling someone you miss, trying something new, or finally starting the project you've been putting off. The core idea isn't about saying yes to everything. It's about recognizing that time is limited and using that fact to choose wisely. YOLO isn't wrong. It's just often misused. Living once doesn't mean living without thought. It means living with intention, because you won't get a second draft. Good things come to those who wait, waiting in line, waiting for a reply, waiting for a big break. Patience is often framed as a virtue, the quiet belief that if you just stay put long enough, good things will eventually show up. That's the promise behind the saying, good things come to those who wait. The idea suggests that time rewards those who are patient, that if you don't rush, force, or chase things, they'll naturally fall into place. In some situations, this mindset works. Growing a skill, building trust, recovering from failure, these all take time, and pushing too hard too fast can backfire. A tree doesn't grow overnight, and neither do most meaningful outcomes. But there's a catch. Waiting only works when it's paired with action. Sitting still and expecting results is not the same as being patient. Patience is not inaction. It's sustained effort without immediate reward. For example, someone training for a marathon doesn't just wait to get better. They run every day, knowing the payoff will take months. That's what patience really looks like. The phrase also runs into trouble when it encourages passivity. Waiting for a promotion without advocating for yourself. Waiting for a relationship to fix itself without communication. Waiting for life to deliver instead of making moves. In these cases, patience becomes procrastination, dressed up as wisdom. There's also the risk of misreading timelines. Some goals do take years. Others might require a shift in strategy, not just more time. Knowing the difference matters. Blind patience can waste years if it's not tied to a realistic plan. So while the idea sounds gentle, it only works when you understand what waiting actually means. It's not about standing still. It's about moving forward, slowly, deliberately, and with the discipline to keep going when results aren't instant. The customer is always right. A customer walks into a store, complains loudly, demands a refund, and quotes the line, "The customer is always right." It's a phrase that's been used for decades, a way to remind businesses to prioritize the people they serve. But behind the slogan is a more complicated reality. The idea began as a business strategy in the early 1900s. Retail pioneers used it to shift the focus away from rigid policies and toward customer satisfaction. The message was simple. Treat customers with respect. Listen to their concerns and make them feel valued. It was a reaction against an earlier era where buyers had little recourse when things went wrong. But over time, the phrase was taken too literally. The customer is always right began to imply that no matter how rude, unreasonable, or even dishonest someone is, they should get what they want. And that's where the problems start. In practice, not every customer is right. Some abuse policies, mistreat staff, or expect unrealistic service. When companies bend over backward to please everyone, it often comes at a cost, usually to employees. Studies show that when businesses prioritize customer satisfaction at all costs, it can lead to burnout, high turnover, and toxic work environments. There's also a balance to maintain. Businesses succeed when they listen to feedback and fix real issues, but they also need clear boundaries. A customer who constantly returns used items, harasses staff, or expects exceptions isn't helping the company grow. They're exploiting it. The original spirit of the phrase wasn't about blind obedience. It was about trust, assuming most people are honest, and building loyalty by treating them well. But respect goes both ways. And running a healthy business means supporting the people who serve, not just the ones being served. Always be positive. A friend's going through a tough time. They open up and someone immediately responds with, "Just stay positive." It sounds supportive, even well-meaning, but over time, that kind of advice can feel more dismissive than helpful. The idea of always be positive is rooted in optimism, the belief that good outcomes are possible, and that focusing on what's going well can improve how we feel. And there's some truth to that. Studies show that maintaining a hopeful mindset can reduce stress, boost motivation, and support mental health. But positivity, like anything, loses its value when it becomes forced or absolute. Problems start when positivity becomes the only acceptable emotion. In real life, people deal with loss, rejection, failure, and fear. And pretending everything is fine doesn't make those feelings disappear. In fact, it can make them worse. When someone feels pressured to be positive all the time, they may start suppressing real emotions, avoiding important conversations, or blaming themselves for struggling. There's also a social cost. If every conversation is met with "look on the bright side," it becomes harder to connect honestly. People stop sharing challenges, and support turns shallow. This is what psychologists call toxic positivity. When positive thinking is used to avoid, minimize, or invalidate real emotions. Being positive isn't bad, but being positive all the time at the expense of authenticity creates a culture where problems are hidden and pain is seen as weakness. The more balanced approach is emotional flexibility, knowing when to focus on hope and when to acknowledge discomfort. Optimism works best when it's honest, when it doesn't cover up pain, but coexists with it. Because true resilience isn't pretending to be fine. It's knowing how to move forward while still telling the truth. You can be anything you want to be. A child hears it in classrooms, on TV, even printed on pencil cases. You can be anything you want to be. It's meant to inspire, to encourage ambition, confidence, and a sense of limitless possibility. But as people grow up, the cracks in that message start to show. The idea behind it is rooted in motivation. If you tell someone they can achieve anything, they might try harder, aim higher, or persist through failure. In that sense, it's about giving permission to dream, especially important for kids who feel boxed in by circumstance, stereotypes, or doubt. But in reality, not every dream is equally reachable. Talent, opportunity, resources, timing, all play a role. Someone might want to be a professional athlete, but lack the physical traits or early training needed. Another might dream of being an astronaut without access to the right education or support. Saying you can be anything oversimplifies the real-world limits that people face. It also creates pressure. If success is simply a matter of wanting it enough, then failure starts to look like a personal flaw. People begin to blame themselves for not achieving unrealistic goals, even when the odds were never in their favor. A more honest message might be, you can pursue anything you're willing to work toward, adapt for, and realistically improve in. Passion is important, but so are skill, feedback, and flexibility. Sometimes the path you wanted isn't the one that fits, and learning to pivot isn't a sign of failure, it's growth. The original phrase isn't useless, it just needs context. Telling someone they can be anything makes more sense when followed by tools, truth, and guidance, because belief alone isn't enough. It's what you build with that belief that really matters. Time heals all wounds. A breakup, a betrayal, the loss of someone close. People often respond with the phrase, time heals all wounds. It's said to offer comfort, a way of reminding someone that the pain won't last forever. But like many comforting phrases, it only tells part of the story. The idea suggests that the simple passage of time is enough to recover from emotional pain. That if you wait long enough, sadness, anger, or regret will eventually fade. In a basic sense, there's some truth to it. Emotions tend to lose intensity over time. What feels unbearable today may feel dull or distant months or years later. The brain adapts. Life moves on. But healing isn't automatic. Time can create distance, but distance isn't the same as repair. Avoided emotions don't disappear. They often go underground and come back in unexpected ways. For example, someone who never talks about a painful memory might seem fine, but still carries unresolved guilt, trust issues, or fear. Real healing usually takes some kind of work, processing, reflection, support, or even therapy. It can mean confronting difficult thoughts, adjusting beliefs, or simply learning to live with a new version of reality. In that sense, time is just a container. What you do during that time matters more than the time itself. There's also no fixed timeline. Two people can go through the same experience and recover at completely different rates. Telling someone time heals all wounds can feel dismissive if they're still hurting after months or years. It assumes that everyone heals the same way, which simply isn't true. The phrase works as a placeholder, a way of saying things will eventually get better, but it misses the more important part. Getting better usually isn't about waiting. It's about what happens in the waiting. Opposites attract. One person is loud and outgoing. The other is quiet and reserved. They meet, and it just works. Or so the story goes. The idea that opposites attract is one of the most familiar explanations for why unlikely pairs end up together. But when you look at the research and real-world outcomes, the picture gets more complicated. At its core, the phrase suggests that people are drawn to traits they don't have. An organized person might be attracted to someone spontaneous. A dreamer might feel grounded by a realist. And in some ways, this does happen. When two people complement each other, balancing strengths and weaknesses, it can create a sense of harmony. One partner handles planning, the other brings flexibility. One is detail-oriented, the other sees the big picture. But the phrase also oversimplifies how attraction actually works. Studies show that, more often than not, people tend to pair up with those who are similar, not opposite. Shared values, interests, communication styles, and life goals tend to build stronger, longer-lasting connections. Similarity makes things easier. It reduces conflict, increases understanding, and creates a sense of being seen. Where opposites attract tends to hold up is in short-term chemistry. People might be intrigued by someone very different, especially at first, but over time, extreme differences, especially in areas like communication, emotional needs, or conflict resolution, can become sources of tension. Opposites can attract, but they often need extra effort to make the relationship function long-term. So while the idea sounds exciting, it's not a universal rule. Compatibility is less about having different traits and more about how two people handle those differences. What matters most isn't whether you're alike or opposite. It's whether the dynamic you create together actually works. Never go to bed angry. Two people argue late into the night. One wants to keep talking, the other wants to sleep. But there's this old idea hanging over them. Never go to bed angry. It's often said like it's a rule for healthy relationships. But in real life, it doesn't always hold up. The advice comes from a good place. It's about not letting resentment fester, not allowing conflicts to stretch into the next day. In theory, resolving issues before sleep can prevent grudges and promote emotional closeness. It encourages communication, accountability, and mutual understanding. But the problem is timing. At night, people are tired. Emotions are worn thin. Cognitive control drops, and even small arguments can spiral. Trying to fix something in the middle of mental exhaustion often leads to more frustration, not less. What might seem like pushing for resolution can come off as pressure or even emotional overload. Sometimes, going to bed angry is actually the wiser move. Sleep allows the brain to process emotion and regain perspective. People often wake up calmer, more willing to listen, and better able to communicate. That doesn't mean avoiding the issue. It means pausing the conversation until both sides are in a better place to have it. There's also the issue of emotional pacing. Not everyone processes conflict at the same speed. One person may want to talk things through immediately, while the other needs time to reflect. Forcing resolution too soon can shut down honest conversation instead of supporting it. The real principle behind the phrase is about returning to resolution, not rushing toward it. The goal isn't to erase every disagreement before sleep, but to stay committed to working through them. Sometimes the best first step toward peace is giving it a night to breathe. Always be the bigger person. Someone cuts you off in traffic. A coworker takes credit for your idea. A family member says something unfair. In these moments, you might hear the advice, be the bigger person. It usually means stay calm, take the high road, and don't stoop to someone else's level. But while the phrase sounds noble, it's not always simple in practice. At its core, being the bigger person means responding to conflict or negativity with maturity, empathy, or self-control, especially when the other side isn't doing the same. It's about breaking the cycle of retaliation. If someone insults you and you insult them back, the tension grows. But if you choose to step back or respond with kindness or logic, you can stop things from escalating. This kind of restraint is often seen as a sign of strength. It suggests emotional regulation, long-term thinking, and the ability to rise above petty behavior. But it can also feel one-sided. If you're always the one staying calm, apologizing first, or letting things go, it can start to feel like you're just absorbing bad behavior. That's where the nuance comes in. Being the bigger person doesn't mean allowing others to walk over you. It's not about suppressing your emotions or avoiding difficult conversations. In fact, sometimes the mature move is to set boundaries, speak up, or walk away, not to stay silent. The phrase also assumes a moral high ground, but not every conflict has a clear right or wrong. Sometimes, both sides have valid points. In those cases, being the bigger person might mean listening with openness, not just backing down. Ultimately, the concept is about choosing responses that create less harm and more understanding. But that doesn't mean abandoning self-respect. It means finding ways to handle conflict that are strong without being aggressive and fair without being passive. Love unconditionally. A parent holds their newborn for the first time. There's no list of expectations, no conditions attached. Just love, automatic, total, and without negotiation. That's the simplest picture of what people mean by unconditional love. The idea is straightforward. Love someone no matter what. It means caring for them even when they mess up, change, or disappoint you. It doesn't depend on them behaving a certain way or giving something in return. In theory, it sounds ideal, a kind of perfect love that never breaks, even under pressure. But in real life, unconditional love can get complicated. For example, someone might interpret it as needing to tolerate harmful behavior or stay in a one-sided relationship. That's not what it means. Unconditional love isn't the same as unconditional tolerance. You can love someone and still set limits. You can love someone and still walk away if your well-being is at risk. At its healthiest, unconditional love is a commitment to care about someone's well-being even when it's hard. Think of close friendships that survive distance, or long-term relationships that go through setbacks. The love stays, even when things aren't easy or fun. It doesn't mean ignoring problems. It means facing them without using love as a bargaining chip. Unconditional love also challenges the way we think about value. In many areas of life, affection is earned, based on performance, looks, or success. But this kind of love pushes back against that idea. It says, "You're enough, just as you are." That doesn't mean anything goes. Healthy relationships still need boundaries, mutual effort, and respect. But the foundation of love, the decision to care, isn't dependent on everything always going right. It's a kind of stability in a world that often treats people as temporary or transactional. Hard work always pays off. You wake up early, stay late, put in the hours, and keep grinding. All with the belief that hard work will eventually be rewarded. It's a message repeated everywhere. Hard work always pays off. But how true is that? At its core, the phrase is meant to motivate. It suggests that if you stay focused, disciplined, and consistent, results will follow. And often, they do. Hard work can build skill, create opportunities, and earn respect. Athletes train for years before a win. Students study through long nights before a breakthrough. Artists practice endlessly before anything clicks. But the phrase skips over a big variable: context. Not everyone starts from the same place. Two people might work equally hard, but one has connections, support, or better timing. The other might hit obstacles they can't control. Effort is powerful, but it's not the only factor. Systems, luck, and access matter too. There's also the question of direction. Working hard in the wrong way or on the wrong thing doesn't always lead somewhere useful. You can put in hours building something no one wants or chasing a goal that no longer fits. That's why hard work alone isn't enough. It needs feedback, adjustment, and sometimes a change of strategy. The idea that hard work always pays off also puts pressure on people when things don't work out. If success doesn't come, the assumption is that they didn't try hard enough, which isn't always fair. Still, effort is one of the few things we can control. It increases your odds, builds resilience, and teaches skills that carry forward, even if the outcome isn't immediate. So while hard work doesn't guarantee success, it often lays the groundwork for it. And that makes it worth doing, even when the payoff takes time. Happy wife, happy life. The phrase sounds light-hearted, even a little playful. Happy wife, happy life. It's often said as relationship advice, usually directed at men, and implies that if a man keeps his wife happy, the household will be peaceful. But beneath the humor is a message worth unpacking. At first glance, it's about harmony. The idea is that if one partner, typically the woman, feels emotionally fulfilled, heard, and supported, then the relationship runs more smoothly. And there's truth in that. In many long-term studies on marriage satisfaction, emotional well-being in one partner can strongly influence the dynamic of the entire relationship. But the phrase oversimplifies a complex partnership. It puts the responsibility for peace on just one side and suggests that keeping someone happy, rather than both people working together, is the key. In reality, any healthy relationship requires mutual respect, open communication, and shared effort. When either partner's needs are ignored or downplayed, resentment builds over time. It also reinforces a stereotype that women are emotionally unpredictable and men should simply appease them to avoid conflict. That's not a healthy foundation for partnership. It turns emotional support into damage control, and it turns caring into obligation. In a more balanced interpretation, the phrase can be reframed. The happiness of your partner, no matter their gender, matters. Not as a strategy to avoid arguments, but as a sign that the relationship is working. When both people feel supported and valued, life tends to be smoother for everyone involved. So while the saying might land as a joke, the better version goes both ways. Mutual happiness makes a stronger foundation. And that doesn't come from tiptoeing. It comes from real partnership. Let babies cry it out. At some point, nearly every new parent hears it. Just let the baby cry it out. It's advice handed down for generations, often from well-meaning relatives, pediatricians, or parenting books. The idea is simple. Babies will eventually learn to self-soothe if you don't rush in every time they cry. But it's far from a one-size-fits-all solution. The cry it out method typically refers to sleep training, where parents intentionally give their baby space to fall asleep on their own, even if it involves some tears. Proponents argue that it teaches independence, builds sleep habits, and helps the baby learn to settle without constant intervention. Some structured approaches, like the Ferber method, even suggest timed check-ins to reassure the child without picking them up. But the method has its critics. Babies cry to communicate, not manipulate. They might be hungry, uncomfortable, overstimulated, or simply seeking connection. In early months especially, responsiveness helps develop trust. Ignoring those signals entirely, especially for long stretches, can be stressful for both the child and the parent. What adds complexity is that not all crying is the same. A tired cry sounds different from one signaling pain or distress. Experienced parents often learn to tell the difference, and many sleep experts recommend a flexible approach, allowing brief crying while remaining attentive to signs that intervention is really needed. Research shows that certain forms of sleep training, when done carefully and age-appropriately, don't appear to harm emotional development. But what works for one baby may not work for another. Some infants adapt quickly, while others become more distressed. In the end, letting babies cry it out is more of a parenting strategy than a rule. It has a place, but only when paired with sensitivity, timing, and a clear understanding of what that baby actually needs. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Tough experiences are often framed as opportunities for growth. You go through something hard, a breakup, a layoff, an illness, and people say, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." It sounds reassuring, but the idea deserves a closer look. At its core, the phrase suggests that surviving hardship leads to resilience, and in some cases, it does. Struggling through failure might build problem-solving skills. Recovering from a health scare can bring a new appreciation for life. People who've faced adversity often develop mental toughness and coping strategies they didn't have before. But the outcome isn't automatic. Not everyone comes out of a crisis stronger. Some are left more anxious, more withdrawn, or more cautious than before. Trauma, in particular, can leave lasting marks that don't disappear just because someone survived. Post-traumatic growth is real, but so is post-traumatic stress. Context matters. If someone has support, resources, and time to recover, they're more likely to learn from a setback. But if they're overwhelmed, isolated, or stuck in survival mode, strength might not follow. It's not the suffering itself that builds resilience. It's how someone is able to process it afterward. Even physical training follows this logic. Muscles don't grow from stress alone. They grow from rest and recovery after the stress. The same goes for psychological resilience. Challenge can lead to strength, but only if there's space to heal and reflect. So the idea that pain automatically produces power oversimplifies a more complex process. Struggle can be a path to growth, but it isn't a guarantee. Saying what doesn't kill you makes you stronger may be comforting in the moment, but strength usually depends on what happens next, not just what happened before. Follow your heart. Sometimes we're drawn to something without fully understanding why. A job, a relationship, a decision. It just feels right. That's the basic idea behind follow your heart. It suggests that deep down, your emotions can guide you better than logic alone. At face value, it's appealing. Logic is cold. Emotions are personal. And in a world full of external pressure, expectations, advice, rules, tuning into what you really want feels like a path to authenticity. Instead of overthinking every choice, the idea is to trust your gut and move toward what feels meaningful. But follow your heart isn't always the simplest compass. Emotions are messy. They can be short-term reactions influenced by fear, desire, nostalgia, or anxiety. Someone might feel drawn to a toxic ex or tempted to quit a job on impulse, only to regret it later. Feelings reflect your state in the moment, not necessarily what's best long-term. That's why this advice can be misleading when taken at face value. A more practical approach might be, listen to your emotions, but filter them through reflection. For instance, wanting to move to a new city might come from restlessness, or it might point to a real need for change. The key is knowing the difference. Even neuroscience supports a balance. The brain's emotional centers and rational centers constantly interact. We're wired to use both, not one over the other. Emotional signals can point you towards something important, but reason helps you weigh the risks and outcomes. So while follow your heart speaks to an important truth, that your desires matter, it works best when paired with self-awareness. Emotions shouldn't be ignored, but they also shouldn't be handed the steering wheel without question. Power pose for confidence. Standing tall with your shoulders back can feel strangely empowering. That's the basic idea behind the power pose. The belief that certain body positions can make you feel more confident, even if you're not. The concept became popular after a TED Talk in the early 2010s. It suggested that by holding expansive, dominant postures, like the classic superhero stance with feet apart and hands on hips, you could actually trigger psychological changes. In theory, these poses could lower stress hormones and increase confidence-building hormones like testosterone. It was a simple hack. Shape your body first, and your mind might follow. For a while, this caught on everywhere. Job interviews, public speaking, high-stakes meetings. People were encouraged to take a few minutes alone before stressful moments, strike a power pose, and walk in feeling bold. But as more research came in, the original claims started to show cracks. Follow-up studies questioned whether hormone levels really changed, or whether the effects were as strong or consistent as first claimed. Critics pointed out that the placebo effect could be at play, that confidence came more from believing the pose helped than from the pose itself. Still, that doesn't mean the idea is useless. There's evidence that posture does affect how people feel. Slouching can make someone feel less energized or less engaged, while standing upright can help people feel more assertive. Even if power posing doesn't change your biology in a measurable way, it can shape your mindset in the short term. In practice, it's less about pretending to be someone else and more about reminding yourself that you're allowed to take up space. Confidence often starts with how you carry yourself, literally, and small physical cues can have a ripple effect on how you think, feel, and perform. Smile to become happy. A smile isn't always the result of happiness. Sometimes it's the starting point. The idea that smiling can actually make you feel happier is rooted in what's called the facial feedback hypothesis. It's a simple concept. The act of forming certain expressions, like a smile, can send signals back to your brain that influence your mood. In other words, the physical act of smiling might boost positive emotions, even if the smile wasn't sparked by joy in the first place. This concept has been explored in psychology for decades. One famous study asked participants to hold a pen in their mouth in a way that either mimicked a smile or blocked it. Those who unknowingly simulated smiling tended to rate cartoons as funnier than those who didn't. It seemed like the facial muscles used to smile could subtly shift someone's emotional state. The theory gained popularity as a low-effort mental trick. When you're feeling down, try smiling. It might not fix the cause, but it can nudge your mood in a better direction. Later studies, though, challenged the strength of this effect. Some failed to replicate the results, leading to debates in the psychology community. But newer research has added nuance. A 2022 meta-analysis looked at dozens of studies and found modest but consistent evidence that facial expressions do influence emotions, not dramatically, but enough to be noticeable. In daily life, smiling might not instantly lift your spirits, but it could shift your focus, soften stress, or even influence how others respond to you. Smiling at a stranger often leads to one in return, and that interaction alone can change the tone of your day. While it's not a cure-all, it's a small behavioral tool with a surprising amount of psychological potential. Tailor teaching to learning styles. Some people learn best by seeing. Others need to hear the information or physically interact with it. That's the basic idea behind tailoring teaching to learning styles. The concept took off in the late 20th century. It suggested that students could be grouped into categories like visual, auditory, reading, writing, or kinesthetic learners. The theory seemed simple. If a teacher figures out how a student learns best and delivers content that matches that style, the student should learn more effectively. For example, a visual learner might prefer diagrams or charts, while an auditory learner may benefit from lectures or discussions. A kinesthetic learner might understand concepts better through hands-on experiments or role-playing. In theory, adjusting instruction to fit these preferences could boost understanding and engagement. But while this idea became incredibly popular in education and training, the research behind it is more complicated. Multiple large-scale studies have examined whether matching teaching methods to learning styles actually improves outcomes. And most of them have found little to no evidence that it makes a significant difference. Students might have preferences. They might enjoy learning a certain way. But that doesn't always mean they retain information better when it's delivered in that format. Instead, what tends to work better is matching the teaching method to the content rather than the learner. For example, learning geometry might benefit more from visuals regardless of the student's preferred style. Learning a language often works best through listening and speaking, even for someone who claims to be a visual learner. So, while the idea of learning styles sounds intuitive, it's not the most effective approach on its own. A more flexible method, combining visuals, discussion, writing, and practice, tends to work best for most learners across most subjects. Willpower is like a fuel tank. Some days, resisting temptation feels easy. Other times, the smallest decision, like skipping dessert or finishing a boring task, feels like a struggle. That's the idea behind willpower as a fuel tank. According to this model, your self-control isn't infinite. It's more like a limited resource that gets used up throughout the day. Every time you force yourself to do something difficult, wake up early, ignore distractions, stay polite under pressure, you use a little bit of that fuel. Psychologists call this ego depletion. The theory gained traction in the early 2000s through experiments where participants asked to resist cookies, for example, later gave up faster on difficult puzzles. The thinking was that their willpower had been partially drained by resisting the snack. It's a relatable idea. If you've ever felt mentally exhausted after a long day of small decisions, it tracks with the notion that willpower runs low over time. And it also helps explain why people are more likely to make impulsive choices, like unhealthy eating or overspending, at night. But more recent studies have called ego depletion into question. Some researchers found that the effect doesn't always replicate across cultures or experiments. Others suggest that beliefs about willpower play a role. If you think it's a limited resource, you're more likely to act like it is. Still, the fuel tank metaphor remains useful. Even if it's not biologically hardwired, energy and focus do fluctuate throughout the day. Fatigue, stress, and decision overload make self-control harder. Structuring your day to protect your energy, like tackling hard tasks earlier or reducing unnecessary choices, can help conserve willpower. In practice, it's less about having endless discipline and more about knowing how and when to use it. Just like fuel, it makes sense to plan for it, refill it, and not waste it on the small stuff. Washing away guilt. You've probably heard someone say they feel like they need to wash their hands clean of something. Turns out, that feeling might not just be a figure of speech. It's something the brain actually responds to. Washing away guilt refers to a psychological phenomenon where physical cleansing, like washing your hands, taking a shower, or even wiping a surface, can reduce feelings of moral discomfort or guilt. It's been studied in psychology under what's known as the Macbeth effect, a term based on Shakespeare's character who tried to scrub away her guilt with obsessive hand-washing. Researchers have found that people who physically clean themselves after recalling an unethical act often report feeling less guilty afterward. In one experiment, participants who wiped their hands after writing about a past wrongdoing were less likely to offer help to someone else afterward, suggesting they already felt their moral debt was cleaned up. This effect ties into the way our brains connect the physical with the abstract. We often use physical metaphors to describe emotions, like feeling weighed down by guilt or needing a fresh start. The act of cleaning may help satisfy that mental need by giving it a physical resolution. The idea doesn't mean guilt just disappears, nor is it a substitute for taking responsibility. But it does show how rituals, like washing up or changing clothes, can psychologically reset us. In some cultures, rituals of purification after a mistake or wrongdoing serve both social and emotional functions. Whether it's symbolic or subconscious, the simple act of washing can do more than clean your skin. It can give your mind a small, tangible sense of closure. And that's part of why this behavior keeps showing up across cultures, across languages, and even across experiments in modern psychology. Posters of eyes make people honest. A few printed eyes on a wall might not seem like much, but in the right setting, they can change how people behave. This idea comes from a series of psychology experiments showing that posters or images of eyes, even fake ones, can increase honest or prosocial behavior. The effect is based on the theory that humans are highly sensitive to cues of being watched. We evolved in social environments where our reputation mattered, so just the suggestion of surveillance can trigger a subconscious shift in behavior. In one study at a university coffee area, researchers alternated two posters above an honesty box, one with flowers and one with a pair of eyes. When the eyes were up, people paid nearly 3 times more for their drinks. Nothing else changed. No cameras, no staff. Just a photo of eyes looking straight ahead. Similar experiments have found that these images can reduce littering, increase recycling, and even nudge people to follow rules more carefully in public spaces. What's striking is how minimal the intervention is. A pair of eyes doesn't issue a warning or create fear, but it taps into a deep-rooted psychological mechanism. When we think we're being observed, we tend to act more in line with social norms. This doesn't mean the effect works everywhere or all the time. It's context sensitive. People must already know what the right behavior is, and the eyes work best in settings where social expectations are already clear, like an office kitchen, a library, or a shared bike rack. Still, it's a powerful insight. Sometimes, our sense of morality isn't just internal, it's shaped by small environmental cues. Even when no one's watching, a simple reminder that someone might be enough to tip the scales. Dress to attract. This advice sounds straightforward. Wear the right clothes, and you'll instantly catch attention and admiration. It's everywhere, in magazines, movies, and social media. But while dressing well can help, the idea that clothes alone make you attractive is an oversimplification that misses the bigger picture. First, attraction is about much more than appearance. Personality, confidence, kindness, and how you carry yourself play huge roles in how others see you. You could be wearing the most stylish outfit, but if your body language is closed off or you seem uncomfortable, people will notice that more than your clothes. Second, the impact of clothing depends heavily on context and culture. What's attractive or appropriate in one setting might be awkward or off-putting in another. A flashy outfit might work at a party, but seem out of place at work. Plus, cultural differences mean that styles admired in one group might not appeal to another at all. Fit matters more than fashion. Clothes that don't fit well or suit your body type can distract or even detract from your appearance. Sometimes, simple, well-fitting basics can make a stronger positive impression than the latest trends. Another factor is authenticity. People respond better when your style reflects who you really are. Trying too hard to dress a certain way to impress others can come across as fake. Genuine confidence shines through much more than any outfit ever could. Finally, attraction is complex and personal. Different people find different things attractive. There's no single look that guarantees success. Dressing well can boost your confidence and help make a good impression, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. True attraction comes from a combination of factors, inside and out, not just what's hanging in your closet. No pain, no gain. This is one of those phrases that shows up everywhere, from gym walls to motivational posters. But behind the slogan is a simple idea. Progress often comes with discomfort. At its core, this concept means that growth, whether physical or mental, typically requires effort, and that effort usually isn't pleasant. In the gym, pushing muscles beyond their comfort zone causes micro tears, which the body then repairs, making them stronger. The soreness that follows a workout isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign that change is underway. But it goes beyond exercise. Think about learning a new skill. The early stages are usually filled with mistakes, confusion, and frustration. That mental strain is a form of pain too. It forces the brain to build new pathways, and over time, what once felt impossible becomes automatic. The discomfort fades, but the ability stays. Even emotional development follows a similar pattern. Facing fears, having tough conversations, or leaving behind bad habits can feel deeply uncomfortable. But avoiding that discomfort often means staying stuck. Short-term pain can be the cost of long-term growth. That said, not all pain leads to gain. The point isn't to seek suffering for its own sake, but to recognize that some degree of struggle is often part of the process. Discomfort doesn't always mean danger. It might mean you're on the edge of improvement. So whether it's lifting heavier, studying longer, or making a hard decision, the principle holds. Challenge is what drives change. Growth rarely happens in the comfort zone, and effort that feels easy probably isn't pushing your limits. No pain, no gain is a reminder that progress usually demands something in return, time, energy, or discomfort, but that the payoff eventually is worth it. Drink 8 glasses of water a day. Most people underestimate how much their energy, mood, and focus depend on something as basic as staying hydrated. Water plays a central role in nearly every function of the human body. From regulating temperature to aiding digestion to delivering nutrients where they're needed. The common advice to drink a specific number of glasses a day has been repeated so often it sounds like a rule. But hydration isn't about hitting a fixed number. It's about meeting your body's needs, which change throughout the day. Physical activity, diet, environment, and even stress levels can all increase how much water your body uses. That's why one-size-fits-all guidance doesn't always work. What actually matters is consistency and awareness. If you're eating a variety of fruits and vegetables, sipping water regularly, and not ignoring signs like dry mouth or fatigue, you're probably doing better than you think. Dehydration doesn't always show up as extreme thirst. It can sneak in as brain fog, tension headaches, or just feeling off for no clear reason. It's also important to know that drinking water isn't only about quantity. Timing matters too. Having water steadily throughout the day is far more effective than chugging a bottle all at once. And while drinks like coffee and tea do count toward your hydration, plain water remains the simplest and most efficient option. Hydration might not be exciting, but it's foundational. It affects your ability to think clearly, move comfortably, and stay energized. And while the exact number of glasses will vary from person to person, making water a regular, conscious part of your daily routine is a habit that quietly supports nearly every other one. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Some habits feel so deeply ingrained, it seems impossible to change them. That's the idea behind the saying that older individuals can't learn new things. It's not really about dogs. It's a metaphor for people who've spent years doing something one way and might resist changing it now. The phrase suggests that the older someone gets, the more set in their ways they become, making it harder to adapt, pick up new skills, or shift perspectives. And to some degree, there's a practical reason behind this thinking. As we age, our routines solidify, and our brain's neuroplasticity, the ability to form new connections, tends to slow down. Learning may require more effort and patience than it did in younger years. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. Studies in neuroscience have shown that the brain continues to adapt across the entire lifespan. People well into their 60s, 70s and beyond can still pick up new languages, learn to use new technology, or change long-standing habits, with the right support and motivation. The bigger obstacle often isn't age, but attitude. If someone believes change is out of reach, they're less likely to try. But when older learners have access to the right tools and encouragement, the results can be surprising. Consider seniors mastering smartphones, retirees learning to paint, or grandparents taking dance classes for the first time. What this idea really touches on is the tension between comfort and challenge. It's easier to stick with what's familiar, especially after doing it for years. But being older doesn't block learning, it just changes how learning might happen. The limits aren't fixed by age. They're shaped more by mindset, opportunity, and the willingness to approach something new. Sleep when you're dead. Some people treat sleep like it's optional, a luxury they'll catch up on later. In high-pressure environments like startups, finance, or creative industries, there's a common mindset. Keep working, stay busy, and rest only when you absolutely crash. That's where the phrase "sleep when you're dead" comes from. It sounds bold and determined, but the idea underneath it is more complicated. At its core, this saying promotes hustle culture, the belief that success requires non-stop effort. If you're not constantly working, you're falling behind. But skipping sleep isn't just about time management. It's about how we value productivity over health. The idea implies that sleep is wasted time instead of a biological function that keeps us alive and thinking clearly. In reality, sleep isn't something you can defer. It plays a direct role in memory, decision-making, mood regulation, and even the immune system. Consistently missing sleep doesn't just make you tired, it lowers your performance across the board. Reaction times slow, attention spans shrink, and emotional control takes a hit. That's why sleep-deprived people often make more mistakes or struggle to focus, even if they're working longer hours. There's also long-term damage. Chronic sleep deprivation is linked to heart disease, diabetes, depression, and even a shorter lifespan. Ironically, the promise of more time by staying awake can end up costing years off your life. The appeal of the phrase comes from its simplicity. It feels like a call to action. But what it overlooks is that rest isn't the opposite of ambition. It's part of what makes ambition sustainable. Just like charging a battery, sleeping restores the capacity to do anything worthwhile the next day. Ignoring that need doesn't accelerate success. It quietly undercuts it. Forgive and forget. When someone hurts you, the memory tends to stick. Whether it's a betrayal, a lie, or a harsh word said in anger, the common advice is to forgive and forget. It sounds simple, but that's rarely the case. The idea combines two actions: forgiveness and forgetting. Forgiveness means making a conscious choice to let go of resentment or the need for revenge. It doesn't mean pretending nothing happened or that what they did was okay. It means deciding not to let that harm define how you interact with the person or how you carry it within yourself. Forgetting, on the other hand, is trickier. Unlike forgiveness, forgetting isn't something you can force. Our brains are wired to remember pain as a way to avoid it in the future. So when someone says, just forget it, what they often mean is, don't let it consume you. But erasing the past isn't realistic or always helpful. Take a workplace example. If a colleague undermines you in a meeting, forgiving them might mean not holding a grudge or retaliating. But forgetting it entirely might not be wise, especially if it's a pattern. Remembering helps you set boundaries and avoid getting hurt again. In close relationships, people often think forgetting is the only way to move on. But healthy moving on usually looks more like acknowledging the harm, understanding why it happened, and deciding how to proceed. It can mean rebuilding trust or choosing to walk away. So while the phrase sounds tidy, real forgiveness often keeps the memory, just without the ongoing anger. It's less about erasing the past and more about choosing what to do with it. You complete me. It's a popular idea in movies and love songs. The notion that one person can complete another. It sounds romantic, almost magical. But underneath the phrase is a set of assumptions about relationships, identity, and emotional needs. The idea suggests that a person is somehow unfinished on their own, and that fulfillment comes from finding the right partner. In everyday life, this might show up as relying heavily on a relationship for confidence, happiness, or purpose. It's the belief that being with someone else fills in what you lack. At first glance, it might feel harmless or even flattering, but it can create problems. If you expect another person to fill emotional gaps, you may put unrealistic pressure on them or lose sight of who you are without them. It shifts the focus away from mutual connection and toward emotional dependence. In healthy relationships, each person brings a sense of self to the table. They may support each other, grow together, and share life's highs and lows, but they aren't responsible for solving each other's inner struggles. Think of it less like completing a puzzle and more like two whole people choosing to build something side by side. It's normal to want closeness, intimacy, and support. But problems begin when personal identity is outsourced to another person. For example, if someone feels lost or empty without a partner, they may stay in unhealthy dynamics just to avoid being alone. Modern psychology encourages the idea of interdependence, not total independence, and not total reliance. It's about being connected without losing individuality. So while "you complete me" sounds sweet, it may be more sustainable and more grounded to aim for relationships that complement rather than complete. Money can't buy happiness. A full wallet doesn't always mean a full life. That's the basic idea behind the phrase, money can't buy happiness. It's not an argument against earning, saving, or spending. It's about the limits of what money can actually deliver. At a basic level, money does improve well-being. It pays for safety, food, shelter, healthcare, essentials that absolutely impact quality of life. But once those needs are met, studies show the emotional returns start to level off. An extra income boost might make life more convenient, but it doesn't always make people meaningfully happier. That's because happiness isn't just about possessions or comfort. It's tied to things like relationships, purpose, health, autonomy, and a sense of meaning. These don't come neatly packaged with a price tag. For example, someone might afford luxury vacations, but still feel isolated or burned out. Another person might earn less but have strong friendships and a sense of community, which contributes far more to their day-to-day emotional state. The pursuit of money can also backfire if it becomes the primary focus. It might push people into jobs they dislike, increase stress, or encourage comparison with others, especially in cultures where wealth is treated as a scoreboard. In those cases, money isn't solving problems. It's reshaping life in ways that don't align with what actually makes people feel fulfilled. This doesn't mean money is irrelevant, but its value depends on how it's used. Spending on shared experiences, giving to others, or reducing time spent on unpleasant tasks tends to have a bigger emotional payoff than buying more stuff. The bottom line: money can improve the conditions for happiness, but it isn't a substitute for the deeper parts of life that make it meaningful. Hard work guarantees success. Working hard is often seen as the key to getting ahead. The idea is simple. If you put in enough effort, success will follow. It's a message that shows up in classrooms, locker rooms, and business meetings. But how true is it? Hard work definitely matters. Most achievements, whether in sports, science, or any creative field, require hours of practice, discipline, and persistence. It builds skill, increases opportunities, and shows others that you're serious. In many ways, hard work sets the foundation, but calling it a guarantee leaves out the rest of the picture. Success is influenced by a mix of factors: talent, timing, connections, luck, access to resources, and even where you were born can all play a role. Two people might work equally hard, but one may face fewer barriers or catch a break that changes everything. That's why hard work can increase the chances of success, but it doesn't always ensure it. It also depends on what you're working hard at. Effort in the wrong direction, like using outdated strategies, ignoring feedback, or chasing a goal without understanding the market, can lead to burnout instead of progress. That's where smart work, not just hard work, becomes essential. Knowing when to pivot, when to collaborate, and how to use your time well makes a real difference. There are countless stories of people who didn't make it despite working tirelessly, just as there are examples of those who rose quickly with a bit of luck. So while effort is almost always part of the journey, it's not the only part. Hard work stacks the odds in your favor. But calling it a guarantee oversimplifies the reality of how success actually works. Love means never having to say you're sorry. Some ideas sound comforting on the surface, but fall apart under a closer look. Take the phrase, "Love means never having to say you're sorry." It suggests that when love is genuine, apologies become unnecessary. That true connection should come with complete understanding, forgiveness, and emotional shorthand. But that's not how relationships work in real life. Even the strongest bonds come with missteps. People forget birthdays, raise their voice during an argument, or make choices that unintentionally hurt the other person. In those moments, an apology isn't just about admitting fault. It's about taking responsibility. It signals that you care enough to repair trust and acknowledge another person's feelings. Apologizing doesn't weaken love, it strengthens it. A relationship built on the assumption that love covers everything without discussion can easily lead to resentment. It removes accountability, and over time, that erodes closeness rather than deepening it. The phrase became popular through a movie script, not because it reflected psychological truth, but because it sounded emotionally powerful. But in practice, avoiding apologies can create the opposite of intimacy. When someone never says sorry, the other person may feel unheard, dismissed, or expected to absorb every mistake in silence. Healthy love includes effort, repair, and self-awareness. Saying "I'm sorry" isn't a sign that the bond is fragile. It's a sign that the relationship is built on respect. It shows that love is not just about feeling good when things go right, but staying present and responsible when things go wrong. So while the phrase may feel romantic or poetic, it doesn't hold up to real-world experience. In lasting relationships, apologies aren't a sign of weakness or distance. They're a part of what keeps love grounded and real. People never change. People can be unpredictable, but one phrase tries to simplify the mess. People never change. It's the kind of idea that gets tossed around after disappointment, when someone breaks a promise, slips back into a pattern, or repeats a mistake that was supposed to be behind them. At its core, this saying suggests that human behavior is fixed, that personality traits, habits, and character flaws are hardwired, and no amount of effort or time can truly change a person. It's rooted in the idea that past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. To some extent, there's truth in that. Habits form over years. Personality tends to remain stable across time. Someone who's impulsive or defensive at 20 might still struggle with those tendencies at 40. Long-term studies even show that traits like extroversion, conscientiousness, or emotional reactivity don't shift dramatically without effort. But saying never misses the full picture. People change all the time, but usually not quickly, and not without a reason. A parent might become more patient after raising a child. Someone may confront deep insecurities after years of therapy. People can become more responsible, more open-minded, or more emotionally mature, especially when their environment changes or when they're motivated by something meaningful. Change is possible, but it's rarely instant. It often requires sustained self-awareness, a support system, and sometimes even failure. What throws people off is the uneven timeline. Someone might change in one area of life while staying stuck in another, or they may change gradually, so slowly that it's only visible in hindsight. The idea that people never change is convenient. It protects us from disappointment. But psychologically, it's overly rigid. Human beings are capable of growth, just not always on schedule. Nice guys finish last. Some people believe being kind is a disadvantage. That if you're too nice, you'll get overlooked, taken advantage of, or left behind. This idea is often summed up in a blunt phrase: nice guys finish last. At face value, it sounds like a warning against being soft in a competitive world. The logic is that if you're always putting others first, avoiding conflict, or trying to please everyone, you'll miss out on opportunities. In business, relationships, or even social circles, assertive people are often seen as the ones who get ahead. They speak up, take charge, and don't hesitate to ask for what they want. But being nice can mean a lot of different things. If it means being respectful, cooperative, or compassionate, then those are qualities that often help people succeed, especially in long-term relationships or team settings. Research in psychology actually shows that people high in agreeableness are more likely to build trust, resolve conflicts, and maintain strong networks. The problem isn't kindness. It's when niceness is paired with passivity. When someone avoids setting boundaries, never says no, or hides what they really think to keep others happy, it can lead to being ignored or undervalued. In that sense, finishing last isn't about being nice. It's about not standing up for yourself. Many successful people are both kind and assertive. They care about others, but they also communicate their needs clearly and take initiative. They're generous without being pushovers. The phrase "nice guys finish last" sticks around because it taps into frustration. But when you unpack it, the issue isn't niceness. It's the lack of balance. Being kind doesn't mean losing. It means learning how to pair warmth with confidence. That's where respect and real progress tend to come from. Go with your gut. You've probably had a moment where something just fell off. No clear reason, no solid proof, just a strong feeling in your gut. And often, that gut feeling turns out to be right. The idea of going with your gut is about trusting your intuition, those quick, automatic judgments that seem to come out of nowhere. It doesn't mean ignoring facts or logic. It means paying attention to what your brain might already know beneath the surface. Intuition is built from experience. Over time, your brain stores patterns from things you've seen, heard, or learned, even if you didn't consciously notice them. So when you face a similar situation, your mind can snap to a conclusion before you've had time to think it through. That's why seasoned firefighters or chess masters can make rapid decisions that feel instinctive, but are actually the result of years of exposure. In everyday life, gut feelings show up in all kinds of ways. Choosing a job offer that just feels right, sensing tension in a room, or picking up on something odd during a conversation. All of these can be guided by intuition. And research in behavioral science shows that in certain situations, fast decisions based on instinct can be just as accurate as slow, analytical ones. That said, gut instincts aren't perfect. They can be shaped by biases, emotions, or incomplete information. So they work best when paired with awareness, when you know which areas you've built real experience in, and when it makes sense to pause and double-check. Trusting your gut isn't about guessing. It's about recognizing that not all thinking happens out loud. Sometimes your mind makes a quiet calculation before you even realize it. And learning to hear that signal while still thinking critically is a skill worth developing. Don't plan, just be spontaneous. The idea of don't plan, just be spontaneous sounds freeing and exciting. It promises memorable moments and a break from routine. But while spontaneity has its charms, relying on it too much can lead to chaos rather than joy. Spontaneity means acting without much thought or preparation. But life isn't always like a movie scene where last-minute decisions magically work out. In reality, important aspects like work, finances, health, and relationships often require careful planning and foresight. Leaving everything to chance can cause stress, missed opportunities, or even serious consequences. For example, imagine trying to manage a busy week without a schedule. Without planning, you might forget appointments, miss deadlines, or double book yourself. What feels like freedom can quickly turn into overwhelm. Moreover, spontaneous decisions aren't always better. Sometimes they lead to poor choices made in the heat of the moment. Saying yes without considering the consequences can bring unwanted stress or disappointment. Psychological studies show that while flexibility is valuable, people who combine planning with openness to change tend to have better outcomes. Planning creates a foundation of stability while allowing room for adjustments when needed. That doesn't mean life should be rigid or overly controlled. But the best approach balances thoughtful planning with occasional spontaneity. Planning doesn't kill creativity. It supports it by freeing mental space and reducing anxiety. In short, abandoning planning altogether is rarely wise. Instead of, don't plan, just be spontaneous. A better motto might be, plan with purpose, but leave room for life's surprises. That's where true balance and memorable moments live. Never change for anyone. The idea of never change for anyone feels empowering. It promises authenticity and self-respect in a world full of pressure to conform. But taken literally, it can become a barrier to growth, connection, and even happiness. People are naturally social beings. Relationships, whether with family, friends, or partners, require flexibility and adaptation. Sticking rigidly to who you are without any willingness to change can create distance and conflict. Sometimes, adjusting behaviors or perspectives is necessary to build trust, show empathy, or grow closer to others. Change doesn't always mean losing authenticity. It can be a sign of maturity. For example, someone who learns to listen more patiently or manage anger better isn't betraying themselves. They're becoming a better version of themselves. Growth often happens through feedback and compromise, not isolation. The never change for anyone mindset can also ignore the positive impact of external influence. Sometimes, others help us see blind spots or inspire us to improve in ways we wouldn't on our own. Refusing to consider these influences can stunt personal development. Psychological research suggests that healthy relationships balance individuality with adaptability. Being too rigid can lead to loneliness or missed opportunities for meaningful connection. Of course, there's a difference between changing under pressure and choosing to grow willingly. The key is openness, not stubbornness. Holding on to this advice too strictly can close off valuable experiences. In the end, change isn't the enemy of authenticity. It's often how we discover who we really want to be, through dialogue, reflection, and sometimes compromise. Embracing that balance leads to stronger relationships and deeper self-understanding. Everything will work out if you stay positive. Staying positive sounds like harmless advice, an easy way to cope when life doesn't go as planned. But the idea that everything will work out if you just maintain a positive attitude has some major gaps. At its core, this belief assumes that optimism alone can control outcomes. The logic is simple: stay upbeat, and things will eventually fall into place. It encourages people to reframe challenges, focus on solutions, and keep hope alive. In that sense, it can be helpful. Positivity has been shown to improve resilience and reduce stress. It can motivate people to take action rather than give up. But that's only part of the story. Where this idea gets tricky is when it oversimplifies complex problems. Not everything improves just because you smile through it. A person dealing with chronic illness, job loss, or systemic barriers can't simply think positive their way to resolution. Real change often requires practical steps, resources, support, and time, none of which automatically come from a good attitude. This mindset can also unintentionally place blame on the individual. If things don't work out, was it because they weren't positive enough? That kind of thinking shifts focus away from real obstacles and towards self-blame. It also discourages people from expressing frustration or grief, emotions that are valid and necessary for growth. Positivity, in a balanced form, can absolutely help people cope. It supports perseverance, reframes setbacks, and keeps motivation alive. But the belief that everything will resolve if you just stay cheerful glosses over the complexity of real-life struggles. Optimism is a useful tool, not a guarantee. Knowing when to use it and when to get practical or seek help makes the difference between blind hope and grounded action. Quitting is for losers. It's drilled into us from a young age. Winners never quit, and quitters never win. The message is clear. If you walk away, you failed. But the idea that quitting is for losers might be one of the most misleading lessons we carry into adulthood. The core belief here is that persistence is always the right path, that if you keep pushing through, success will eventually follow. And in many situations, persistence does pay off. Athletes train for years. Entrepreneurs face repeated failures before things click. In these cases, Quitting early might mean missing out on eventual breakthroughs. But not every situation rewards stubbornness. Sometimes quitting is exactly what's needed. Take someone stuck in a degree they hate simply because they've already invested 2 years. Or someone pouring time and energy into a business idea that consistently loses money. Sticking with it isn't always noble. It can just lead to more loss. Psychologists call this the sunk cost fallacy. When we've already spent time, effort, or money on something, we feel compelled to continue, even if it's no longer a good choice. The idea that quitting equals losing only adds more pressure to stay. In reality, strategic quitting is a skill. It means recognizing when the cost outweighs the benefit. It means choosing growth over ego. Shifting careers, ending unhealthy relationships, or stopping a failing project doesn't make someone weak. It shows they're paying attention to reality. The blanket statement that quitting is for losers ignores the nuance of good decision-making. Persistence is valuable, but so is the ability to re-evaluate. In a world full of opportunities, staying stuck for the sake of appearances can be the real loss. Knowing when to walk away isn't failure. It's often the first step towards something better. Follow your dream at all costs. Some advice sounds powerful on the surface, but falls apart under real-life pressure. Follow your dream at all costs is one of them. It's meant to inspire courage and determination, especially when you're facing obstacles. But the phrase skips a critical part of the story. Not all costs are worth it. The idea is simple. If you want something badly enough, keep going, no matter what. It promises that sacrifice will eventually lead to fulfillment. But in practice, dreams don't exist in a vacuum. Life comes with rent, responsibilities, relationships, and health. Treating a dream like a mission, no matter the consequences, can lead to burnout, debt, or strained connections. That doesn't mean people shouldn't pursue meaningful goals. Passion is important. Having something to work toward can bring energy and purpose. But when the dream starts costing everything, your sleep, your income, your peace of mind, it's worth looking more closely. Take the example of someone who wants to be a filmmaker. They quit their job, pour their savings into gear, and move to a big city with no plan B. Years go by. They're under constant stress, working side gigs just to survive. The dream hasn't died, but their health and stability have taken a serious hit. Now contrast that with someone who still wants to make films, but takes a slower route. They build skills on the side, save money, collaborate with others, and learn how the industry works. It's not glamorous, and it takes time, but it's sustainable. The difference comes down to strategy. Dreams matter, but how you pursue them matters more. Blind commitment can backfire. A flexible approach often gets you farther. Following a dream doesn't require ignoring reality. It requires working with it. The early bird gets the worm. Waking up early is often painted as a secret weapon for success. The phrase, "the early bird gets the worm," captures that idea in one line. It suggests that people who rise early and get a head start tend to outperform those who sleep in. But how much truth is there behind this belief? At its core, the phrase is about opportunity. The bird that wakes first has first access to food. Translated to daily life, this means that those who begin their day ahead of others might catch more chances, whether it's being the first to apply for a job, start a workout, or tackle a to-do list before distractions hit. There's also a psychological effect. People who wake up early often feel more in control. Mornings are quiet, uninterrupted, and can offer a sense of calm before the demands of the day ramp up. For many, this head start creates momentum. One productive hour early on can lead to more focused hours later. However, the story isn't as simple as early equals better. Productivity isn't only about clocks, it's also about rhythms. Some people naturally function better later in the day. Forcing yourself to wake up early if your body and brain are at their best in the evening can actually make you less effective. It's also worth noting that success isn't just about starting first, it's about finishing well. An early start helps when it aligns with your lifestyle, priorities, and energy levels. But being early isn't a guarantee, it's a tool. And like any tool, it only works if you use it right. The phrase sticks around because in many cases, showing up first does help. But context always matters more than the slogan. There are no coincidences. You're thinking about someone and suddenly they text you, or you stumble across a book that answers a question you didn't even know you were asking. Moments like these make people say, there are no coincidences. It's the idea that everything happens for a reason, and that what seems random is actually part of a hidden pattern. At its core, this belief comes from our tendency to search for meaning. Humans are wired to spot patterns. It's how we survived, by noticing connections between events, predicting outcomes, and making sense of the world. But sometimes, this instinct kicks in even when no real pattern exists. Two unrelated events can occur close together, and our brain fills in the gap with a story. Psychologists call this apophenia, seeing links that aren't actually there. It's not irrational, it's how we try to impose order on chaos. But just because something feels meaningful doesn't mean it has a deeper cause. The law of large numbers tells us that rare events are bound to happen occasionally, purely by chance. In a world with billions of people and constant interactions, strange overlaps are not just possible, they're inevitable. Still, that doesn't mean the experience of coincidence isn't powerful. Coincidences can draw attention to things we've ignored. They can nudge us toward reflection or encourage us to act. In that sense, the belief that there are no coincidences can be less about objective truth and more about perspective. It frames random events as meaningful, whether or not they were planned. Some see it as fate, others see it as pattern recognition. Either way, it reflects a deeper truth. We're meaning-making creatures living in a world full of surprises, and sometimes the timing alone is enough to make something feel important. If at first you don't succeed, try until you do. Sometimes things don't work out on the first try. You study hard and still fail the test. You pitch your idea and get no response. So the advice kicks in. If at first you don't succeed, try. Try again. This idea is rooted in persistence, the belief that continued effort will eventually lead to success. And in many cases that's true. Learning new skills, building a business, or mastering a craft almost always involves setbacks. Progress isn't linear. Improvement comes from repetition, adjustment, and resilience. Trying again isn't just encouraged, it's often necessary. But when the phrase is taken literally, try again indefinitely, it gets more complicated. At some point, trying again might mean running into the same wall repeatedly. The issue isn't just about persistence, but about feedback. If every attempt is exactly the same, the result will probably be the same too. That's where the distinction matters. Trying again doesn't mean repeating blindly. It means testing, tweaking, and learning with each round. Think of an inventor refining a prototype, or an athlete adjusting their form. Each attempt is slightly different than the last. Persistence works best when it's paired with reflection and strategy. There's also the cost of effort to consider. Time, energy, money, these aren't unlimited. Sticking with a goal can be admirable, but only if the goal still makes sense. Knowing when to stop or change direction isn't quitting. It's adapting. So while try again captures a valuable mindset, it's not a one-size-fits-all rule. Persistence is powerful, but progress depends on more than just repetition. It depends on learning from what didn't work and knowing when to try something new. If you're not stressed, you're not working hard enough. The belief that if you're not stressed, you're not working hard enough or you're failing is surprisingly common. It suggests that stress is a necessary badge of honor, a sign you're pushing your limits and making progress. But this idea is misleading and frankly harmful. Stress is your body's natural response to challenges. In small doses, it can boost focus and motivation. But chronic stress, the kind that never lets up, takes a serious toll on both mental and physical health. It impairs memory, decision-making, and creativity. It weakens the immune system and increases the risk of heart disease. So, constantly equating stress with success ignores these damaging effects. The notion that stress equals productivity also promotes unhealthy work habits. It encourages people to overwork, skip rest, and sacrifice self-care, all in the name of grinding. But research shows that burnout leads to decreased efficiency, mistakes, and even quitting. High-performing individuals often emphasize balance, prioritizing recovery and mental well-being alongside effort. Moreover, stress is not the only indicator of progress. Many successful people work calmly and steadily, using organization, smart planning, and effective time management to avoid unnecessary pressure. Feeling composed and in control often leads to better outcomes than feeling overwhelmed. This idea also fuels guilt and anxiety for those who don't constantly feel stressed. It can make people doubt their own productivity or value when they're simply functioning in a healthier, more sustainable way. In reality, success is not about how much stress you endure. It's about how well you manage your energy, focus, and resilience. Sustainable achievement comes from working smart, setting boundaries, and taking care of your mind and body. Stress isn't proof of effort. It's a signal to pause and adjust. You can know the book by its cover. It's easy to make snap judgments about other people. Someone cuts in line, doesn't return a text, or shows up late, and instantly the brain starts filling in the blanks. Maybe they're selfish. Maybe they're rude. But this instinct to judge is rarely based on the full story. The idea of never judge others is grounded in the fact that human behavior is complex, and most of it happens behind the scenes. People often act the way they do because of circumstances we can't see: stress, fear, illness, family issues, or a dozen small things that aren't obvious on the surface. Psychologists call this the fundamental attribution error. It's the tendency to assume that someone's actions reflect who they are, rather than the situation they're in. For example, if a coworker misses a deadline, it's easy to think they're lazy, but maybe they're caring for a sick parent or dealing with burnout. This doesn't mean we should excuse bad behavior or ignore patterns when they matter, but jumping to conclusions about someone's character based on limited information usually leads to misunderstandings. It also creates social distance, making it harder to empathize, collaborate, or resolve conflicts fairly. Cultural background, upbringing, and past experiences also play a role. What looks like indifference might actually be shyness. What feels like hostility might be someone's way of protecting themselves in unfamiliar situations. Choosing not to judge doesn't mean pretending everyone's perfect. It means recognizing that there's almost always more going on than we realize. And until all the facts are in, assumptions do more harm than good. In practical terms, it's often better to stay curious instead of certain. Understanding beats assumption, and a little patience can go a long way. Ignore problems and they will go away. Some problems feel easier to avoid than to face. An awkward conversation, a stack of unpaid bills, a minor health concern. It's tempting to hope that if you leave them alone long enough, they'll somehow solve themselves. But the idea that ignoring problems makes them disappear rarely holds up in practice. This belief comes from a natural human instinct: discomfort avoidance. We tend to sidestep situations that bring anxiety, embarrassment, or emotional friction. It feels safer in the moment to delay action than to confront what's unpleasant. But while that strategy can offer temporary relief, it usually makes things worse over time. In psychology, this is called passive coping. It's when a person deals with stress not by addressing the issue, but by distracting themselves, rationalizing it away, or waiting for it to resolve on its own. Sometimes, this works for very minor things, like a bad mood that fades or a glitch that resets. But with real-life challenges, avoidance tends to let the issue grow unchecked. A small leak in a pipe can become water damage. A missed deadline can turn into a missed opportunity. Tension in a relationship can quietly build into resentment. The longer these problems are ignored, the more effort they require to fix, and sometimes the less fixable they become. There's also a cognitive cost. Unresolved problems don't disappear from the mind. They linger in the background, draining focus and adding to low-level stress. Over time, this can lead to burnout, anxiety, or decision fatigue, especially when the same problem keeps resurfacing in different forms. In short, ignoring a problem doesn't usually make it go away. It makes it invisible until it isn't. What feels like peace can often just be delay, and delay eventually becomes consequence. Money is the root of all evil. Money isn't dangerous by itself. It's a tool, a medium of exchange that lets people trade goods, measure value, and store wealth. But the phrase, money is the root of all evil, points to something deeper: how the pursuit of money can distort priorities, decisions, and relationships. At its core, this idea is about motivation. When money becomes the main reason behind someone's actions, it can lead to choices that harm others. Bribery, exploitation, fraud. These don't happen because someone simply has money. They happen when money becomes more important than fairness, ethics, or empathy. History and headlines offer countless examples. Corrupt officials embezzle public funds. Corporations cut corners on safety to boost profits. Scams prey on vulnerable people. In each case, the driving force is not money itself, but the decision to place profit above people. Psychologists call this instrumental thinking, when the focus shifts to outcomes over values. The more people tie their sense of success to money, the more likely they are to justify risky or unethical behavior. Studies show that even subtle reminders of money can increase selfishness and reduce cooperation in group settings. But it's not just about crime or corruption. On a smaller scale, obsession with money can erode relationships. It can lead to workaholism, status anxiety, or chronic dissatisfaction. When money becomes the measure of self-worth, it's hard to ever feel like it's enough. That's what the phrase really warns about. It's not that having money is evil, it's when money becomes the goal rather than a means that things start to unravel. Because the more weight we place on money alone, the easier it becomes to overlook what's being sacrificed to get it. Success comes to those who wait patiently. Some goals take time, but this notion can often be misconstrued. The idea that success comes to those who wait patiently may sound profound, yet it can easily lead to complacency. While indeed some achievements require effort and persistence, the notion that patience alone is a virtue is misleading. It's not merely about playing the long game. It's about being strategic and adaptable in your journey towards success. At first glance, the concept of patience appears constructive, an encouragement to endure and persist through challenges. However, in practice, the passive interpretation can foster a sense of inaction. It may encourage individuals to remain static, believing that success will somehow materialize as long as they wait. This is far from reality. Consider a person training for a marathon. Their success relies not just on pacing, but on a well-structured training plan that includes varied workouts, rest, nutrition, and sometimes a willingness to adapt their strategies based on feedback or setbacks. The path to success requires agility, not just endurance. While it's true that patience plays a role in many endeavors, learning a language, growing a business, recovering from failure, it is equally essential to recognize that this is complemented by proactive efforts. Science may suggest that delayed gratification can yield better long-term outcomes, but it's crucial to note that waiting does not equate to stagnation. The best outcomes often come from those who balance patience with initiative, taking decisive action when opportunities arise rather than simply enduring through challenges. Moreover, the most effective form of progress isn't merely about resisting shortcuts. It involves recognizing when to pivot, when to innovate, and when to seek help or mentorship. Accepting that not everything is within your control is important, but relinquishing your role in actively shaping your path can be detrimental. In the end, steady effort is valuable, but it's not enough on its own. True success requires a blend of patience and proactive engagement, a willingness to hustle, but also to recalibrate. While hustle might attract attention, it is the combination of strategic action with perseverance that truly builds the foundation for lasting achievement. Face is the index of mind. Physical appearance is often the first thing people notice. It's quick, it's obvious, and it's everywhere, from magazine covers to social media filters. The phrase "beauty is only skin deep" pushes back against this by pointing out that looks don't reveal much about a person's character, values, or intentions. At its core, the idea separates surface-level traits from deeper qualities. Being attractive might influence first impressions, but it doesn't guarantee someone is kind, honest, or trustworthy. In fact, relying too heavily on appearance can lead to shallow judgments, both about others and ourselves. The phrase also serves as a reminder of how fragile outer beauty really is. Age, injury, or illness can change how someone looks, but those changes don't automatically make someone less valuable. In contrast, qualities like empathy, patience, or humor aren't visible on the surface, but often matter far more in daily life. In real-world scenarios, the limitations of surface beauty show up quickly. A co-worker might dress well and carry themselves confidently, but that doesn't mean they'll be helpful on a tough deadline. A charming date might look great in photos, but still behave selfishly in small, unnoticed ways. Outer beauty might draw attention, but it doesn't sustain relationships, solve problems, or build trust. The phrase doesn't mean beauty has no place. It simply puts it in perspective. Physical traits are just one dimension of a person, and while they can enhance how someone is perceived, they don't define who they are or what they bring to the table. In practice, beauty might open a few doors, but deeper traits are usually what keep them open. Love conquers all. When life gets difficult, People often turn to the idea that love can solve anything. Love conquers all is one of those sweeping phrases that sounds comforting, but what does it actually mean? At face value, it suggests that love is powerful enough to overcome any obstacle. That if people care about each other deeply enough, things like distance, hardship, disagreement, or even failure don't stand a chance. The logic here is simple. Emotional connection creates resilience. Two people navigating a crisis might endure it better if they feel supported. A family facing financial strain might pull together, not fall apart, if there's a strong bond at the center. The idea applies across types of relationships: romantic, platonic, familial. It's not just about passion or romance. It's about loyalty, understanding, and shared effort. In that sense, love conquers all isn't saying that love magically removes problems. It's saying that love changes how people respond to them. But there's a practical side to consider. Love doesn't erase consequences or fix bad decisions. A toxic dynamic doesn't become healthy just because love is involved. There are limits. Mutual respect, communication, and accountability matter. Without those, love can't carry the weight alone. Still, love does often motivate people to try harder, forgive more easily, and show up even when it's inconvenient. A parent working 2 jobs might keep going because they love their child. A friend might drive through the night just to be there during a tough moment. These aren't grand gestures. They're quiet signs that love can push people past their usual limits. So while love might not literally conquer every obstacle, it often shifts the odds. It becomes the reason people persist, compromise, or rebuild. That's where its real strength lies, not in removing struggle, but in reshaping how people face it. Always put others first. This phrase sounds noble, even admirable. It's often taught as a sign of kindness, humility, or strong character. But what does it actually involve, and what are its limits? At its core, the idea encourages selflessness, prioritizing someone else's needs before your own. This could mean letting a coworker take credit to boost their morale, helping a friend move when you're exhausted, or giving up your seat on a crowded train. These acts can build trust, smooth relationships, and create a sense of community. In many situations, putting others first is what makes cooperation and empathy work. But taken literally, always is where things get tricky. If someone consistently sacrifices their own needs, time, or well-being, they might end up burned out or resentful. Imagine a person who keeps saying yes to every request. Eventually, they may have nothing left for themselves. Relationships can become one-sided. Boundaries blur. There's also a difference between generosity and self-neglect. Helping others is a strength when it's a choice, not when it's a constant expectation. In healthy dynamics, consideration should move both ways. Sometimes, putting yourself first doesn't mean being selfish. It just means being fair. Culturally, this phrase is often directed more at some groups than others, especially in parenting, caregiving, or service roles. And while the intention might be to inspire compassion, it can unintentionally pressure people to tolerate imbalance. So, while putting others first can foster goodwill and deepen relationships, it works best when it's done thoughtfully, not automatically. The most effective kindness comes from people who also take care of themselves, so that their support is sustainable, genuine, and not at the cost of their own stability. All you need is love. Love is often described as the most powerful force in the world. The phrase, "all you need is love," takes that to the extreme, suggesting that love alone can solve everything, from personal struggles to global problems. The core idea here is that emotional connection, support, and care matter more than money, status, or success. It's the belief that when people feel loved by family, friends, or a partner, they're more resilient, fulfilled, and motivated. In relationships, for example, love is seen as the glue that holds people together through conflict, stress, or hardship. And in broader society, the phrase implies that more love, meaning more empathy, kindness, and cooperation, could reduce suffering. But the phrase can oversimplify complex realities. Love might be essential, but it doesn't pay rent, solve health problems, or fix broken systems on its own. For instance, someone might feel deeply loved, but still struggle with unemployment, mental health, or discrimination. These are real problems that require practical solutions, not just emotional support. In personal relationships, love alone also isn't always enough. Healthy dynamics rely on trust, communication, shared goals, and boundaries. Two people can love each other deeply, but still be incompatible or unhealthy together if their needs or values constantly clash. So, the phrase makes an emotional point. It highlights just how important love is in people's lives, but taken literally, it leaves out the full picture. Love is powerful, but not self-sufficient. It works best when paired with effort, resources, and mutual respect. In the end, the saying speaks more to what people long for than what always works in practice. Love may not fix everything, but it often creates the emotional foundation from which everything else becomes possible. You can have it all. At some point, most people run into the uncomfortable truth. You can't have it all. The idea sounds limiting, but it's actually rooted in the reality of how life works. Time, energy, and attention are limited resources. If you choose to pour yourself into a demanding career, that often means having less time for family or hobbies. If you want to be present with your kids every day, you might need to turn down promotions or travel opportunities. Trying to maximize every area of life at once, success, relationships, fitness, travel, personal growth, often leads to burnout, not balance. This phrase isn't saying you can't have a great life. It's saying that meaningful achievements require trade-offs. Even small things come with choices. Training for a marathon might mean skipping weekend plans. Building a startup might mean sacrificing stability for a while. Saying yes to one priority usually means saying no to something else. In popular culture, the idea of having it all is often sold as possible with the right routine or mindset. But behind most success stories, there's sacrifice. A famous actor might be celebrated for their career but miss major family events. A successful entrepreneur might quietly struggle with health or loneliness. These aren't failures, they're the price of focus. You can't have it all doesn't mean giving up. It means choosing what matters most to you, rather than chasing everything at once. Life gets easier to manage when expectations are real, and success becomes more satisfying when it's built on conscious trade-offs, not endless juggling. Ignorance is bliss. While the adage, ignorance is bliss, may initially seem appealing, it oversimplifies the complexities of reality. This belief suggests that remaining unaware of challenges or uncomfortable truths can protect us from distress. However, it neglects the crucial role that knowledge plays in personal growth and informed decision-making. Certainly, a child playing outside or a carefree tourist may find joy untouched by harsh realities, but this viewpoint fails to recognize that awareness can cultivate resilience and adaptability. Knowledge empowers individuals to confront challenges rather than evade them. For instance, understanding financial responsibilities or navigating the intricacies of relationships equips us to handle life's complexities. ultimately leading to greater satisfaction and fulfillment. The emotional toll of knowledge, manifesting as anxiety, guilt, or grief, are undeniably real, yet they are integral to the human experience. Learning to confront and process these emotions can facilitate personal development and deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world. Conversely, shunning knowledge can lead to ignorance that breeds fear and uncertainty, hindering meaningful engagement with life's challenges. Furthermore, the belief that ignorance safeguards our peace of mind is fundamentally misguided. While it may offer momentary relief, it often creates a false sense of security. By disregarding vital information, we risk making uninformed decisions that can have severe long-term repercussions. For example, ignoring health concerns or relationship issues can escalate into predicaments that become increasingly difficult to navigate, resulting in regret and further pain. Ultimately, the notion that ignorance is bliss serves as a temporary escape. True peace of mind and emotional well-being arise from embracing knowledge, accepting, processing, and utilizing it to guide our choices. Living with awareness fosters empowerment, enriching our own lives and those of others, and leading to a more resilient and fulfilling existence. The grass is always greener on the other side. It's easy to believe that someone else has it better, that their job is more fulfilling, their relationship more exciting, their life somehow more complete. That's the idea behind the phrase, "the grass is always greener on the other side." It captures a common feeling, the tendency to idealize what we don't have and underestimate what we do. At its core, this is about comparison. When we're stuck in traffic, it feels like the next lane is moving faster. When our routine feels dull, someone else's spontaneous lifestyle looks more appealing. But often, that impression is shaped more by perception than reality. We see the highlights of others and compare them to the behind the scenes of our own lives. This mindset isn't always about envy. Sometimes it's driven by restlessness or the belief that satisfaction lies just beyond our current situation. It can push people to switch careers, relocate, or leave relationships, not because things are bad, but because they imagine something better must be out there. There's nothing wrong with aiming higher or wanting change, but the trap lies in thinking that happiness is always elsewhere. When that becomes a pattern, people chase new things without addressing the root of their dissatisfaction. It creates a cycle where each new lawn eventually starts to look just as patchy as the last. This idea also appears in marketing, social media, and even friendships. We're constantly shown curated images and stories that make other lives look simpler or more rewarding, but we rarely see the full picture. What looks like greener grass might be artificial turf, or just grass with different problems. So while curiosity and ambition are valuable, this phrase reminds us to pause before we assume that different always means better. Often, it's just unfamiliar. If you build it, they will come. Some ideas feel true just because they sound hopeful. One of them is the belief that if you build something meaningful, people will naturally find it. A business, a blog, a product. Create it, and the world will show up. That's the promise. The appeal comes from how it centers effort. You focus on your craft, your passion, your vision. It's comforting to think that good work speaks for itself, but in reality, building something is only half the challenge. The other half is getting anyone to notice. In the real world, there are countless examples of great ideas that go unnoticed. A restaurant with amazing food might close down because no one knew it existed. A game-changing invention can stay buried without the right pitch or platform. Visibility, timing, and strategy often matter just as much as quality. This doesn't mean you shouldn't build. It means building alone won't always guarantee attention. Discovery doesn't happen automatically. You often have to market, share, explain, and invite people in. Still, the phrase holds a different kind of truth in long-term projects. Sometimes, building with consistency builds momentum. A small YouTube channel uploads every week and slowly grows. A local event starts with 3 people and becomes a movement over time. In those cases, what you build does draw people in, but only if you're willing to stick around. So while effort is essential, expecting results without outreach sets people up for disappointment. What you build has to be seen, shared, and supported. In the end, it's not just what you make that matters, it's how you bring it into the world. Trust the process. While the phrase "trust the process" carries valuable insights, it is crucial to acknowledge that not all journeys unfold in a straight line. Blindly adhering to a process can sometimes lead to stagnation. The belief that great achievements must be pursued slowly and steadily can overshadow the vital roles of adaptability, innovation, and timely pivots. Progress is not solely about gradual ascents. It often requires bold leaps that demand swift and decisive action. Take, for instance, someone learning to play an instrument. While practice is essential, so too is the willingness to modify techniques, seek feedback, and experiment with various styles to discover what truly resonates. Adhering rigidly to a method that yields little success can lead to frustration instead of mastery. In numerous fields, sports, education, and business, success stories frequently highlight breakthroughs stemming from unconventional strategies, sudden insights, or a readiness to change course. Athletes may require new training regimens when progress slows. Students often thrive with creative study techniques rather than traditional rote learning. And businesses may need to pivot their offerings in response to market demands to remain viable. Trusting the process does not equate to ignoring the signals that suggest a need for re-evaluation. Feedback is invaluable. It informs decision-making and helps identify when it's time to alter tactics. Sticking to a plan solely out of stubbornness can result in wasted time and resources. Furthermore, having faith in a process can sometimes breed complacency. While patience is important, there are moments when decisive, risk-taking actions can lead to breakthroughs that a gradual approach would never achieve. It is crucial to strike a balance between maintaining a long-term vision and remaining agile enough to respond to changing circumstances. In the end, while a structured approach can serve as a helpful framework, flexibility and responsiveness are equally critical. Achieving complex goals often involves navigating uncertainties, seizing opportunities as they arise, and recalibrating strategies to reach desired outcomes. In the quest for growth, whether in health, skills, or business, adaptability should complement the process, ensuring you remain on a dynamic path towards success. Everything in moderation. While the notion of moderation carries an appealing simplicity, it misses the mark when applied as a blanket principle for every aspect of life. This idea often masquerades as sensible advice, but it can inadvertently stifle genuine growth and fulfillment. The reality is that sometimes embracing extremes can be far more beneficial than walking the tightrope of moderation. Consider the world of health and nutrition. Sure, indulging in cake every meal is excessive, but so is treating every indulgent food as a guilty pleasure to be savoured in moderation. This can lead to a cycle of denial and regret. Rather than forcing yourself to limit indulgences, why not allow for the full experience of enjoying food? By fully embracing your desires, be it cake at a special occasion or a hearty meal when hungry, you cultivate a healthier relationship with food, removing the stigma and guilt that often accompanies moderation. In the realm of work and productivity, the danger of prescribed moderation is even more pronounced. The hustle culture may be overwhelming, but the solution isn't to counter it with enforced breaks or a half-hearted pace. Instead, a passionate dive into work during bursts of inspiration can lead to unparalleled creativity and achievement. Allow yourself the freedom to push boundaries and explore your passions, rather than wedging your ambition into a restrictive framework of balance. The intense focus can often yield results that a steady, moderate approach simply cannot. Turning to social media, moderation is often heralded as the savior against mindless scrolling. However, what if you dove headfirst into the digital realm, fully engaging with the content and connections that excite you? By immersing yourself in these platforms with intent, you can enrich your experiences rather than dilute them with a tepid approach. The key is not to limit your engagement, but to cultivate mindful usage that resonates with your goals and interests. The same applies to personal development. Continually striving for just enough improvement can lead to stagnation. Why shy away from radical change or intense focus on self-growth? Embracing transformative experiences, even if they are intense or challenging, can lead to profound insights and lasting change that moderation can obscure. In conclusion, the idea that everything in moderation should be the guiding principle could inadvertently confine us. Life is not designed for constant equilibrium. It thrives in the dips and peaks of passion, commitment, and engagement. While moderation can be a useful tool in some situations, it's not a universal remedy. Instead of seeking a middle ground, let's embrace the beauty. Boys will be boys. Underneath the surface of childhood behavior, there's a subtle line between what's excusable and what's encouraged. When roughness, teasing, or emotional shutdown are brushed off with a shrug, it's not just a harmless moment, it's an early lesson, and that lesson sticks. The idea behind excusing certain behaviors based on gender often sounds like a shortcut. It saves adults from tough conversations and avoids challenging norms. But what it really does is set up a lower standard. It says this is expected, instead of this can be better. It quietly reinforces the idea that boys are naturally less empathetic, less responsible, or less emotionally aware. And with repetition, that becomes a script they internalize. The impact isn't always loud or immediate. It shows up in a reluctance to apologize, in hiding emotions behind jokes, or in believing that accountability is optional. It can make empathy feel foreign and communication feel weak. Over time, these small allowances build into habits that limit not just how someone treats others, but how they see themselves. There's nothing inevitable about how someone acts just because of their gender. Young minds are shaped by what the world allows and what it corrects. And when certain behavior patterns are passed off as just the way things are, it closes the door on growth. The reality is, everyone benefits when expectations are clear, fair, and human. Not stricter, just better. Not shame-based, but responsibility-based. When we stop excusing behavior on the basis of identity, we create space for actual character to form. And in that space, people of all kinds can rise above the labels they've been handed. Work smarter, not harder. It sounds like a shortcut, a promise that if you just think cleverly enough, you can skip the grind entirely. But that idea leaves out one crucial thing. Most meaningful work still demands effort. A lot of it. The phrase encourages efficiency, and on paper, that's appealing. Use better tools, manage your time, avoid wasted effort, all great in theory. But in reality, many people take it as an excuse to avoid hard work altogether. They start chasing productivity hacks instead of getting through the boring, difficult parts that actually move things forward. Smarter strategies help, sure, but they don't replace persistence. A writer can have the cleanest note-taking system in the world, but the book still needs to be written, word by word. A founder can automate emails and outsource design, but building a company still takes long nights and high stress. And not all tasks are smartable. A nurse pulling a double shift can't optimize their way out of exhaustion. A construction worker can't mind map their way past lifting bricks. In many jobs, the hard part is the job. Even in fields that seem creative or technical, long hours of repetition, trial and error, and problem solving are unavoidable. Intelligence and strategy matter, but they're not a substitute for time and energy. The real trick isn't choosing between smart work and hard work. It's knowing when you need both. Efficiency without effort doesn't get much done. And effort without direction burns out fast. But together, that's how progress is made. A leopard can't change its spots. Some people are seen as set in stone, as if who they are today is who they'll be forever. That's the idea behind the belief that deep down, people don't really change. This mindset often shows up in situations where someone messes up, apologizes, and then does the same thing again. Whether it's a friend who constantly flakes, a partner who keeps crossing boundaries, or a coworker who never delivers, we start to assume the pattern isn't a phase, but a feature. It's not a bad week. It's just who they are. The phrase implies that personality is permanent, and in some ways, there's truth to that. Traits like temperament, impulse control, or emotional patterns can be surprisingly stubborn. They're shaped by a mix of genetics, habits, and years of reinforcement. And even with therapy or major life changes, some patterns don't vanish. They just get managed better. But the idea becomes a problem when it's used too broadly. It can turn into a reason to give up on people. Or worse, a reason to excuse harmful behavior, like saying, well, that's just how they are, instead of holding someone accountable. In psychology, there's strong evidence that change is possible, but it's often slow, uneven, and hard to measure. People don't flip overnight, but they can shift, especially with sustained effort, clear incentives, or new environments. The question isn't whether people can change, but whether they will. Assuming no one ever changes might help protect us from disappointment, but it also locks people into fixed roles. And when we stop expecting better from someone, or ourselves, that's often when growth really stops. So while it's risky to expect instant transformation, it's just as risky to believe it's impossible. Practice makes perfect. Mastering anything takes time, whether it's cooking, coding, or playing the piano. The idea that repeating something over and over leads to perfection is a comforting one. It suggests that effort alone can bridge the gap between beginner and expert. At the surface, this sounds true. The more you do something, the better you generally get at it. Repetition builds familiarity, strengthens muscle memory, and helps the brain fine-tune its responses. Practice helps reduce hesitation and increases precision, whether you're learning a tennis serve or rehearsing a speech. But the phrase leaves out something important. Repetition alone doesn't guarantee improvement. Practicing the wrong technique repeatedly can make bad habits harder to undo. For instance, a guitarist who plays with poor finger positioning for months won't magically become great. They'll just get better at playing badly. That's why experts emphasize deliberate practice. It's not just about doing something again and again, but doing it right, with full attention and constantly correcting mistakes. The focus isn't on how much you practice, but how you practice. Feedback, reflection, and breaking down skills into manageable chunks matter far more than simply putting in the hours. Another nuance is that perfection itself might not be realistic. There are always external limits, physical constraints, mental fatigue, even randomness. So while practice can push someone toward excellence, perfection remains more of a direction than a destination. Still, the core message holds value. Improvement usually isn't magic or talent alone. It's the result of consistent effort. Just as long as we understand that practice needs to be guided, not mindless, and that what we aim for isn't flawless execution, but steady progress. Beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. The phrase, "beauty is in the eye of the beholder," may sound wise, but it oversimplifies an idea that is far more complex. While it is true that perceptions of beauty can vary, the suggestion that beauty is purely subjective undermines a deeper understanding of aesthetic appreciation. In reality, beauty is more than mere opinion. It is a construct influenced by societal norms, historical contexts, and biological imperatives. Consider the idea that beauty is shaped by individual experiences and cultures. While personal experiences play a role, they are often overshadowed by dominant cultural narratives that dictate what is considered desirable. The fashion industry, for example, unabashedly propagates trends that can dictate public perception of beauty. These trends are often fleeting, and those who do not conform to them may be marginalized, suggesting that beauty is more of a social construct than a personal viewpoint. Furthermore, the supposed preferences demonstrated by babies are not as innocent as they may appear. What babies prefer is often a reflection of the environment and stimuli they are exposed to, which can be heavily biased by the media and societal input. Therefore, the assertion that beauty stems purely from individual perspectives fails to acknowledge the significant conditioning that shapes those preferences. Moreover, while some may argue that there are patterns in beauty, such as symmetry being universally admired, it is important to recognize that these attributes are often employed to uphold societal standards. Symmetry may be biologically appealing, but the obsession with it can lead to unrealistic expectations that disregard a wide spectrum of beauty that exists in imperfection and diversity. The notion of beauty being subjective is, in fact, deeply flawed. By upholding this belief, we fail to challenge the harmful standards perpetuated by society and the media. Instead of celebrating a range of definitions, we fall into a trap where only certain forms of beauty are validated, often at the expense of others. This creates a hierarchy where conventional beauty is prioritized, leaving those who do not fit the mold feeling inadequate. In reality, beauty is not merely a delightful quirk of human perception. It is an elaborate tapestry that intertwines societal influences, biological factors, and cultural expectations. Our connections to beauty are shaped by pervasive influences rather than purely personal experiences. Patience is a virtue. Some people seem to treat waiting as a sign of wisdom, as if doing nothing for long enough will magically bring results. But patience by itself isn't a guarantee of anything. It's just a delay, one that only works when paired with the right kind of action. The idea that patience is a virtue comes from the belief that resisting impulsive behavior makes someone morally better. that being calm, composed, and willing to wait is a sign of character. And sometimes it is. Waiting out a bad decision, holding back from snapping at someone, letting long-term goals guide your short-term behavior. These are all useful forms of patience. But problems start when patience becomes passive. When someone stays in a bad job for years hoping it will get better. Or when a relationship clearly isn't working, but they wait, thinking things will change if they're just more patient. At that point, it's not discipline, it's indecision. And indecision often hides behind the mask of virtue. The truth is, patience works best when it's connected to strategy. If someone is building a skill, saving for a goal, or working through a plan, they need time. And that time requires patience. But patience is not a goal in itself. It's just a tool. Like restraint, it needs to be applied with intent, not blindly celebrated. The danger in treating patience as inherently good is that it encourages inaction. It praises endurance without questioning what's being endured. And it rewards stillness, even when movement might be wiser. Virtue isn't in the waiting. It's in knowing when to wait and when to move. It is what it is. Sometimes things just happen, and there's no fixing, changing, or explaining them away. That's the heart of "it is what it is." A phrase used when reality is uncomfortable, unchangeable, or simply not worth arguing about. On the surface, it sounds like acceptance, and often that's what it is. A way to acknowledge a situation without wasting time on blame or endless analysis. The flight got cancelled, the project fell apart, the person let you down. You can't undo it. So, you say it, move on, and focus on what's next. But it's also a double-edged phrase. Because sometimes it isn't just acceptance, it's resignation. It can be used to shut down a conversation, to avoid deeper reflection, or to dismiss real problems that do have solutions. In that way, it becomes more of a defense mechanism than a mindset, like a shortcut to avoid discomfort rather than deal with it. For example, a manager might use it to brush off a flawed company policy. A friend might use it to excuse someone's bad behavior. In these moments, "it is what it is" becomes a way to stop thinking, to stop challenging, and to stop trying. Still, the phrase does have a place. Not everything can be solved or understood. Sometimes people really are irrational. Systems are slow. Outcomes are unfair. And in those moments, acceptance might actually be the most rational response. But that only works when it's followed by action elsewhere. Letting go of what can't be changed in order to shift energy toward what can. "It is what it is" should be a pause, not a full stop. A recognition of reality, not a surrender to it. Used wisely, it clears space. Used too often, it closes doors. What goes around comes around. Let's take a closer look at the concept of karma. The notion that actions, be they good or bad, inevitably come back to haunt or reward us. While it's alluring to think of life as a cosmic fairy tale, where the universe meticulously balances the scales of justice, the reality is far more complex and less predictable. First, let's dismantle the idea of a moral scoreboard. Life isn't a game with clear rules and outcomes. The world is chaotic and filled with randomness. People can act with kindness and generosity their entire lives and still face immense suffering. Illness, loss, and hardship can strike anyone, regardless of their actions. Conversely, unscrupulous individuals can thrive, enjoying wealth and happiness while their deeds go unpunished. This disparity challenges the core notion of karma, that good actions will be rewarded and bad actions will be punished. In social dynamics, it's true that our behaviors influence how others perceive and react to us. A person who consistently lies may create a reputation that leads to isolation. However, this is a reflection of societal interactions rather than a mystical law of returns. The consequences of actions are often context-dependent and heavily influenced by external factors, including environment, luck, and timing. For instance, someone can be generously helpful but still find themselves abandoned when times get tough because relationships are complex and nuanced. Moreover, attributing life's events to karma can lead to dangerous complacency. It fosters a victim-blaming mentality, where those suffering misfortunes may be viewed as deserving their plight due to unseen wrongdoings. This perspective can obscure the reality that many factors, including systemic issues and pure chance, play significant roles in people's lives and outcomes. It's a simplification that robs us of empathy and understanding for those who struggle through no fault of their own. The psychological comfort of believing in karma is significant. It offers closure and hope. When we see a wrongdoer face consequences, it feels like justice, a reassuring balm for our desire for fairness. But this reliance on karmic justice can distract us from addressing real-world inequities and injustices. It can lead to inaction, as people might assume that the universe will handle wrongdoers rather than taking steps to create change themselves. Lastly, let's consider the spiritual dimension often associated with karma. Many who believe in karma posit that these cosmic laws extend beyond our current lifetime, implying that actions in one life affect future reincarnations. This adds an otherworldly. It's never too late. There's a prevalent misconception that starting late inherently hinders one's journey. However, the reality is that success often stems from timing and readiness rather than mere initiation. The mantra, "It's never too late," may overlook the undeniable advantages of early actions and the momentum they create. Many people who embark on new ventures late in life encounter challenges that could have been mitigated had they started earlier. Career transitions become tougher without the foundational years of experience, and learning curves steepen when age-related cognitive changes come into play. Delaying personal development means missing out on the growth that occurs during those earlier years. Societal timelines, while sometimes restrictive, exist for good reasons. Milestones like formal education, professional advancement, and retirement are benchmarks that help organize life's journey. Ignoring these timelines can lead to misalignment with one's environment and missed opportunities. The pressure to start young can act as motivation rather than a hindrance, pushing individuals to cultivate skills and networks that are often crucial for success. Indeed, pursuing passions later offers some benefits, such as clarity and experience. But these advantages often come at the cost of time that could have been spent refining skills, building connections, or gaining invaluable experiences earlier. The belief that it's never too late can foster complacency, leading individuals to underestimate the value of early preparation and proactive engagement. Ultimately, while it's true that starting later can yield results, it's crucial to recognize the significant benefits of early action. Regret can be a powerful catalyst for change, but it shouldn't overshadow the advantages of seizing opportunities when they first arise. Timing, after all, plays a vital role in the pursuit of aspirations. Confidence is the key to success. Some people seem to move through the world with ease. They speak up in meetings, take risks, and bounce back from rejection without flinching. What they have isn't necessarily more talent or intelligence. More often, it's confidence. Confidence is the belief that you can handle what comes your way. It doesn't mean you always win, or that you never doubt yourself. It just means you're willing to act, even without a guarantee of success. And in many situations, that willingness is exactly what opens doors. In school or at work, confident people are more likely to raise their hands, volunteer, or ask for opportunities. They tend to perform better, not because they're more capable, but because they participate more often. This creates a self-reinforcing loop. The more they act, the more feedback they get, and the better they become. Meanwhile, people with the same potential but less confidence often hold back and get overlooked. Confidence also plays a big role in how others see you. Employers, colleagues, even strangers are more likely to trust someone who seems sure of themselves. This perception can influence hiring decisions, promotions, and collaboration. In this way, confidence becomes a kind of social signal, a shortcut that says, "I've got this," even before results come in. But confidence doesn't have to be loud or flashy. It can look quiet and steady, like calmly standing by a decision or showing up when it matters. It's also not something you either have or don't. Confidence can be built through practice, small wins, and learning how to tolerate failure without crumbling. Ultimately, confidence helps turn potential into reality. It's not magic, and it won't replace hard work. But without it, even the most capable people can find themselves stuck on the sidelines. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. In most systems, whether it's school, work, or customer service, those who speak up tend to get more attention, not necessarily because they deserve it more, but simply because they're louder. The squeaky wheel gets the grease is a way of describing how people or problems that demand the most attention are often the ones that get resolved first. In practical terms, it means that being vocal can sometimes be more effective than being polite, quiet, or patient. You see this play out all the time. A student who constantly follows up with a teacher may get more feedback. A customer who complains, calmly or otherwise, might get their refund faster than someone who quietly accepts a delay. In the workplace, employees who consistently raise concerns or make their contributions known often end up being promoted faster than those who just keep their heads down and work hard. It doesn't mean you have to be aggressive, but in environments where attention is limited, being silent can easily make you invisible. Managers, teachers, and decision makers are often overloaded. They respond to what's in front of them. If you're not speaking up, it's easy to be overlooked. That said, this approach has limits. Being too loud, too often, without substance can backfire. You want to raise issues with intention, not just for attention. And ideally, the grease isn't just given to whoever shouts the most, but to those whose concerns genuinely warrant it. Still, in a busy world, silence is easy to ignore. Learning how to speak up, clearly, constructively, and at the right time, is often what turns a small frustration into a solved problem, or a good idea into a real opportunity. If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Doing something you enjoy can absolutely make long hours feel lighter, but that doesn't mean it's not still work. The phrase suggests that if you truly love your job, the hard parts won't feel hard anymore. That somehow, passion cancels out pressure, deadlines, or fatigue. It's an appealing idea, and sometimes it's partly true. People who enjoy what they do often stay more motivated, push through setbacks, and find personal meaning in their tasks. But enjoying your work doesn't remove the reality that it's still a job. Even the most passionate artist has to deal with frustration. Even a dedicated teacher faces burnout. Loving what you do can make things better, but it doesn't erase responsibilities, stress, or the need for rest. It's also worth noting that not everyone has the luxury of doing what they love. Many people work to survive, not to self-express. And for those who do get to follow their passion, turning it into a career can introduce new challenges. Creative freedom can become tied to income. Personal joy can get tangled with performance metrics. That's not to say it's not worth chasing work you care about. In many cases, it's what keeps people going, but it helps to approach it with realistic expectations. Loving your work can energize you, but it doesn't mean you'll never feel exhausted. It can motivate you to keep going, but it doesn't guarantee success. And it certainly doesn't mean every day will be easy. Ultimately, work is still work. What changes is the relationship you have with it. Passion doesn't eliminate effort. It just makes that effort feel more worthwhile. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Sometimes the best solution is to leave things alone. That's the thinking behind this idea. The phrase, "if it ain't broke, don't fix it," suggests that when something works well enough, trying to change it might do more harm than good. It comes from a practical mindset. Why spend time, energy, or resources solving a problem that doesn't exist? In many everyday situations, it makes sense. If your old washing machine runs fine, replacing it with a new high-tech model could just introduce unnecessary complexity. If a team's routine is running smoothly, tweaking the process might slow them down. But while the logic is sound in certain cases, it can also create blind spots. Just because something isn't obviously broken doesn't mean it's perfect, or even optimal. There may be inefficiencies no one's noticing, or improvements waiting just out of view. Sticking to what's always worked can hold back progress. That's why some industries stagnate while others evolve. This mindset also depends heavily on context. In critical systems like healthcare, aviation, or cybersecurity, not broken doesn't mean good enough. Waiting for something to go wrong before acting can be costly. Preventative upgrades, routine maintenance, and innovation are often essential, even when things seem fine on the surface. So the idea is less about resisting change and more about being intentional with it. Not every situation demands a fix, but assuming that all stability is good can be risky too. The key is balance. Recognizing when to preserve what's working and when to improve what could work better. It's not about avoiding action entirely, it's about choosing it wisely. The best things in life are free. Some of the most meaningful things in life don't come with a price tag. They aren't bought in stores, and they don't show up on receipts. The phrase, "the best things in life are free," points to experiences and values that hold deep importance, yet aren't tied to money. Things like friendship, laughter, love, time with family, a quiet moment in nature, or even a deep breath after a long day. These aren't products, they're moments, connections, and feelings, and they tend to be the things people remember most. It's not saying that money has no role. Financial security matters. It allows access to healthcare, safety, education, and many essentials. But the phrase challenges the idea that happiness can be measured by income or possessions. You can buy a comfortable bed but not restful sleep. You can pay for a lavish vacation but not peace of mind. You can rent attention but not genuine respect. Even in work and ambition, this principle shows up. A person might chase promotions or wealth, thinking those are the keys to satisfaction, only to realize that feeling fulfilled often comes from doing something meaningful, not just profitable. A compliment, a shared laugh, or a moment of understanding between two people, none of these require payment, but they can leave a lasting impact. In everyday life, this idea helps us notice what's already around us. It highlights the value of the simple and sincere, things that are easy to overlook when everything is focused on cost or gain. And while not every free thing is necessarily valuable, many of life's most rewarding moments are surprisingly accessible, not because they're cheap, but because they were never meant to be bought in the first place. When one door closes, another opens. Losing an opportunity can feel like an insurmountable setback. A job rejection, a breakup, or a missed chance often seems to signal failure. However, the notion that when one door closes, another opens oversimplifies life's complexities, suggesting change is inherently positive. This idea dismisses genuine grief and discomfort associated with loss, implying they can be overlooked in favor of the unknown. While it's true that some setbacks may lead to new paths, this isn't universal. Many individuals find themselves stuck in despair, unable to pivot or see potential alternatives. Not getting a job or admission doesn't guarantee growth. It can lead to stagnation or decreased motivation instead. The closed door isn't merely a springboard. It can trap people in uncertainty. It's important to recognize that opportunities often arise from proactive choices rather than mere happenstance. Life paths are not random, but shaped by effort, planning, and connections. A closed door may not always create space, but might rather seal off potential avenues altogether. Waiting for opportunity can lead to inaction and frustration. Furthermore, the new door isn't a guaranteed or quick discovery. Not everyone emerges from loss with renewed clarity. Many struggle to regain their footing amidst uncertainty. Change can bring chaos rather than hidden gems, complicating rather than enriching lives. This concept can inadvertently trivialize real pain and struggles. Sometimes, cancelled plans mean disappointment rather than rediscovered joy. Ending a habit may lead to anxiety, not simply a better routine. It's essential to acknowledge that loss matters deeply. Transitions are often fraught with difficulty, not just filled with unseen possibilities. Keep improving yourself. Feeling like you constantly need to improve can be exhausting. There's always something to fix, a habit to change, a goal to reach, a version of yourself that feels more acceptable. The idea of accepting yourself exactly as you are sounds simple, but it goes against a lot of the messages people absorb every day. At its core, this idea is about recognizing your worth without tying it to constant achievement or external validation. It means being able to look at your flaws, mistakes, and quirks without seeing them as proof that something is broken. Instead of chasing a version of perfection that keeps moving further away, it's about acknowledging that your current self, with all its messiness, is valid. That doesn't mean giving up on growth. It just means that growth doesn't have to come from shame. You can want to eat healthier without hating your body. You can want to get better at something without believing you're not good enough as you are now. Self-acceptance isn't the end of progress. It's the place progress can actually begin. Think of it like this. When you accept yourself, you stop wasting energy on pretending. You make room to understand your real needs, not just the ones you think you should have. And you stop building your identity around constant self-criticism. This kind of acceptance can change how people treat themselves in everyday life. It affects the risks they're willing to take, how they handle failure, and how they set boundaries. It's not about settling, it's about being honest. And honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, is what makes lasting change possible. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Cheating in a relationship is one of the most damaging forms of betrayal. It breaks trust in a way that can be hard to repair. The phrase, once a cheater, always a cheater, suggests that anyone who cheats once is bound to do it again, no matter the circumstances. It's a claim that sounds certain and absolute. But real life is often more complicated than that. The idea comes from the belief that cheating reflects something permanent in a person's character. Maybe it's seen as a lack of self-control, a tendency to lie, or an inability to commit. And in some cases, those patterns do repeat. But it's not true for everyone, and it overlooks what often leads to cheating in the first place. Some people cheat because they're unhappy, impulsive, or emotionally immature. Others make a terrible decision in a moment of stress or insecurity, and later feel real remorse. What matters is not just the act itself, but how a person responds to it. Do they take responsibility? Do they understand the impact of what they did? Are they willing to work on the issues that led them there? There's research showing that while past cheating can increase the chances of doing it again, it doesn't guarantee it. People change, relationships change, contexts change. One mistake, even a serious one, doesn't always predict the future. That doesn't mean trust should be given easily after a betrayal. Rebuilding trust takes time, effort, and consistent behavior. But assuming that someone is incapable of growth cuts off the possibility of genuine change. This idea tries to simplify a very human problem. But when it comes to relationships, blanket rules rarely work. People are flawed, but they're not fixed in place. Failure is not an option. There's a certain appeal to treating failure like it doesn't exist. In high-stakes situations, like a space mission or a medical emergency, the idea that failure is not an option sounds like the only attitude you can afford to have. It signals absolute commitment, total focus. But in everyday life, this mindset can be more complicated and sometimes even harmful. At its core, the phrase means pushing forward no matter what. You don't plan for backup. You don't accept defeat. You aim for the outcome you want and refuse to consider that it might not happen. That can be useful when the stakes are clear, the mission is critical, and hesitation could cost lives. In those cases, it creates urgency. It keeps people aligned. But outside of that kind of pressure cooker, the phrase can turn unrealistic very quickly. Most goals, whether personal or professional, are not life or death. They involve uncertainty, trial and error, and learning as you go. Saying, failure is not an option in these settings doesn't make you more disciplined. It just makes it harder to adapt. When you see failure as unacceptable, you're less likely to take risks or experiment. You hide mistakes instead of learning from them. You burn out trying to stay perfect. In reality, failure isn't just an option. It's often a requirement. It's how we gather information. It's how we adjust course. Some of the most successful people in any field got there, not because they avoided failure, but because they knew how to respond to it. The idea sounds bold, but real progress usually happens when failure is on the table, not when it's denied. Treating setbacks as part of the process makes success more sustainable, not less. Pain is weakness leaving the body. Pain is often seen as a sign that something's gone wrong. A pulled muscle, a stinging emotion, a moment of failure. Our first instinct is to avoid it. But there's a popular idea, especially in high-discipline environments like sports or the military, that pain isn't just discomfort, it's progress. The phrase, pain is weakness leaving the body, captures that mindset. At face value, it suggests that pain is a kind of cleansing process, that every ache or strain is a sign that you're growing tougher, shedding limitations. It's meant to motivate, push harder, endure more, and come out the other side stronger. In certain contexts, this can be a helpful mental frame. Athletes recovering from intense workouts, for example, know that sore muscles often mean adaptation is taking place. The body breaks down so it can rebuild stronger. But this idea has limits. Not all pain is productive. Some pain is a warning, not a sign of progress. Pushing through a sprain or ignoring chronic stress isn't strength. It's neglect. Equating all pain with weakness leaving the body can lead people to ignore real problems until they become worse. It's also easy to stretch this thinking into areas where it doesn't quite belong. Emotional pain, for instance, doesn't always make you stronger just by existing. Growth usually happens not because of pain itself, but because of how someone responds to it, whether they reflect, adapt, or change course. The phrase works best as a metaphor for resilience, not as medical advice. In a controlled setting with clear goals, pushing through difficulty can build endurance. But pain, in itself, isn't proof of progress. Understanding when to push and when to rest is what turns discipline into long-term strength. Rewards needs risk. Some of the biggest turning points in life happen just outside your comfort zone. That's the simple idea behind no risk, no reward. To get something valuable, you often have to step into uncertainty. This doesn't mean jumping blindly into danger. It means recognizing that most worthwhile achievements carry some level of risk. Starting a business, switching careers, moving to a new city, each of these involves trading stability for the possibility of something better. The reward could be financial gain, personal growth, or a more meaningful life. But none of that happens without first accepting the possibility of failure. In finance, this idea is baked into the system. Safer investments usually offer smaller returns. Bigger returns often come from riskier ventures. The same logic plays out in everyday life. The student who speaks up in class might be wrong, but might also learn more. The artist who shares their work might face criticism, but could also find an audience. Risk exposes you to loss, but it also opens the door to opportunity. That said, not all risks are equal. Smart risk-taking involves calculation. It's not just about being bold. It's about knowing what you're risking, what you might gain, and what the consequences are if it doesn't work out. Some people take impulsive risks and call it courage. But real risk-taking often looks more like preparation, timing, and knowing when it's worth the leap. The idea of no risk, no reward isn't a call to be reckless. It's a reminder that growth, success, and breakthroughs usually require leaving the safety of what you already know. Risk doesn't guarantee reward, but avoiding all risk usually guarantees that nothing changes. It takes money to make money. Building wealth isn't just about working harder. It's often about having the resources to get started. The phrase, "it takes money to make money," captures this reality. It's the idea that having even a small amount of capital can open doors to opportunities that aren't available otherwise. Consider a simple example. Starting a business. You need money for inventory, equipment, advertising, maybe even employees. If you don't have that upfront investment, it's harder to get the business off the ground. The same goes for investing. Buying stocks, real estate, or launching a product. All of it typically requires putting money in before you can get anything out. But this idea isn't just about having piles of cash. It can also apply to time, tools, or access. A laptop and an internet connection can be all someone needs to launch a freelance career. A small marketing budget might be enough to get attention for a product. The concept is that some form of investment, even modest, is often needed to generate returns. That said, there's a deeper layer. The saying also reflects the structural advantages built into financial systems. Those with existing wealth often have more access to lower interest rates, insider networks, and better financial advice. This can make the rich get richer effect feel like a self-sustaining loop. Still, understanding this principle can be empowering. It means that even small, smart investments, whether in a side hustle, a course, or a tool, can be the first step toward generating income. It's about using whatever resources you have to create more. While not always fair or equal, the basic pattern holds true. Putting something in is often required before anything meaningful comes out. You must be busy to be successful. Being constantly busy is often seen as a badge of honor. Packed calendars, late nights, back-to-back meetings. They've come to symbolize drive, ambition, and success. But being busy isn't the same as being effective, and that's where this belief starts to fall apart. The idea that you must be busy to be successful comes from a cultural obsession with productivity. If you're not rushing, it can feel like you're falling behind. But many of the most impactful people don't cram every hour with activity. They focus on doing fewer things, better. They value clarity over chaos. Busyness can actually become a trap. It fills time with tasks that feel important, but don't move the needle. You might spend hours answering emails, attending unnecessary meetings, or chasing low-priority goals, while neglecting the one decision or action that could make a real difference. In that sense, being busy can feel productive while keeping you stuck. Real success often comes from calm, deliberate effort. It's about knowing what matters and having the discipline to ignore what doesn't. That might mean long stretches of focused work, regular breaks, or even downtime that helps with thinking clearly. The point isn't to do more, it's to do what's necessary with full attention. There's also a mental cost to constant busyness. Burnout, decision fatigue, and poor judgment can all creep in when there's no time to slow down. And ironically, this can end up hurting the very progress that the busyness was meant to achieve. Success isn't about being in motion all the time. It's about making your motion count. And sometimes, the quietest work, the planning, the deep thinking, the pause before the leap, ends up being the most powerful. Trust isn't really that important. Trust holds things together that rules alone can't. In friendships, business, or society, it acts like invisible glue, strong, but easy to overlook until it's gone. At its core, trust is a simple belief that others will do what they say, that intentions match actions, and that we're not being taken advantage of. This belief allows people to cooperate, to delegate, to relax. Without it, every small task requires surveillance, contracts, or backup plans. Life becomes slower, more defensive, and filled with second guessing. In close relationships, trust shows up in day-to-day interactions. You don't check if a friend really booked the table or if a partner paid the bill. You just assume they did. That assumption saves time, energy, and stress. And when it breaks, everything gets harder. Mistrust adds friction. In professional settings, trust is just as critical. A team functions well when people believe in each other's competence and motives. When trust is low, people withhold information, cover for mistakes, or work in silos. Projects stall not because of skill gaps, but because no one feels safe enough to collaborate openly. Even markets rely on trust. Consumers trust that what's on the label is what's inside the product. Investors trust that reports are accurate. When that trust collapses, like during financial scandals or data leaks, it doesn't just damage a brand, it can trigger broader panic. Building trust isn't about grand gestures, it's about consistency, showing up, following through, telling the truth, even when it's inconvenient. Over time, Those small moments form a pattern that others come to rely on. And while trust takes time to build, it only takes one careless moment to break. That's why the strongest systems, whether between people or institutions, are the ones that treat trust not as a bonus, but as a necessity. Chase your dreams. Big ideas are exciting, but without a plan, they don't go far. Wanting to open a bakery, start a company, write a book, that initial vision is important. It's what sparks movement, but on its own, it doesn't build anything. A dream becomes real only when it's followed by structure. That includes steps, timelines, and decisions. You can picture the bakery full of customers, but without a plan for renting a space, sourcing ingredients, or managing finances, that image stays just that, an image. A wish feels good to think about. It's comfortable, flexible, and risk-free. You can carry it around without committing to it. A plan, on the other hand, demands clarity. It turns vague hopes into concrete tasks. And that transition, from the abstract to the practical, is where most people get stuck. Turning a dream into a goal means identifying what needs to happen first, then second, then next week. It means defining what success even looks like. Otherwise, it's like setting out on a road trip without checking a map or packing a bag. You might move, but not in a useful direction. The gap between people who dream and those who achieve often isn't talent. It's structure. The student who outlines their study schedule gets better results than the one who wants to do well. The artist who sets a daily work target finishes projects. The entrepreneur who breaks down big goals into weekly sprints makes progress, while others stay stuck in the planning phase. A dream without a plan might sound romantic, but it tends to drift. A plan adds weight. It gives the dream form, momentum, and accountability. And that's what turns a nice thought into something that can actually happen. What you don't know can't hurt you. There's a reason this idea sounds comforting. If you don't know about something bad, you can't stress over it. That's the appeal. Ignorance seems to offer a kind of emotional protection. No late-night worrying, no spiral of what-ifs. Just peace through unawareness. But that peace can be dangerously misleading. At its core, what you don't know can't hurt you assumes that knowledge is the problem rather than the situation itself. The truth is, not knowing about a problem doesn't prevent it from affecting you. It just makes you less prepared to deal with it. Take health, for example. Someone might avoid going to the doctor because they're afraid of bad news. They feel fine, so why dig? But if there's an issue developing, one that could be treated early, avoiding the diagnosis only gives it more time to grow. The ignorance doesn't protect them. It just delays action. The same applies in finance. Not checking your bank balance won't stop you from going into overdraft. Not reading a contract won't stop it from containing hidden fees. Unawareness doesn't shield you. It makes you more vulnerable. In relationships, not wanting to know if someone is upset might avoid immediate conflict. But that doesn't stop tension from building underneath. Problems ignored don't disappear. They just become harder to fix. It's true that some information can cause distress. And there are moments where not knowing feels easier in the short term. But that ease often comes at a long-term cost. Information gives you options. It opens the door to solutions, even if they're uncomfortable. In almost every area of life, awareness is what allows people to act, adjust, or protect themselves. Not knowing doesn't stop the harm, it just stops the warning. There are no second chances. In many areas of life, you don't get a do-over. A missed deadline, a broken promise, a chance you hesitated on. Once it's gone, it's often gone for good. That's the basic idea behind there are no second chances. It's not just about being dramatic. It's about recognizing how time, trust, and opportunity work in the real world. In professional settings, opportunities are competitive. If someone passes on a job interview, delays a response, or fails to prepare, there may not be another opening. Businesses move on. Decisions are made quickly, and in fast-paced industries, people who wait often get left behind. In relationships, second chances are even more fragile. Trust is easy to lose and hard to rebuild. If someone lies or betrays another's confidence, it's not guaranteed that things can return to normal. The damage might be repairable, but that's not automatic. Saying "I'm sorry" doesn't rewind the clock. There's also the matter of timing. Some moments really do expire. The last train leaves. The enrollment window closes. The game ends. Not every opportunity is flexible. Sometimes missing it means starting over. Not from the same place, but from further back with more obstacles. This idea pushes people to treat each moment with more seriousness. It emphasizes preparation, timing, and respect. Not every mistake is recoverable. Not every path can be retraced. That doesn't mean people can't grow or try again. But it does mean that trying again often happens under different circumstances, with fewer options, or with more effort required. In practice, the world doesn't always wait, and when it doesn't, the first chance is sometimes the only one that counts. Good friends are hard to find. A real friend doesn't just show up when things are easy. A good friend sticks around when plans fall apart, when moods shift, when silence replaces fun. That kind of person is rare. And that's exactly why the saying "good friends are hard to find" rings true. We often confuse proximity with connection. Just because someone's around doesn't mean they genuinely care. Acquaintances are everywhere. Co-workers, classmates, neighbors, people we joke with or follow online. But real friends go deeper. They listen without keeping score. They don't vanish when you're struggling. And they remember the things that matter, even when you forget to say them out loud. What makes good friendships so uncommon is that it takes time and consistency. It's easy to be liked when things are light-hearted. But good friends are the ones who stay steady across months and years. Not just during parties or celebrations, but when someone needs to vent or disappear for a while. They're the ones who don't get offended when you cancel plans or fail to reply right away. Another reason they're rare is that true friendship asks for effort on both sides. Not everyone is willing or able to invest in something that doesn't offer immediate rewards. It takes trust to open up. It takes patience to navigate misunderstandings. And it takes maturity to show up even when it's inconvenient. So while casual connections come and go, the people who earn your trust over time are few and far between. That's what makes them valuable. A good friend isn't just someone who's fun to be around. It's someone whose presence quietly makes your life more stable, more honest, and less alone. Those kinds of friendships don't just happen. That's why they're hard to find. Mother knows best. There's a reason the phrase "mother knows best" has stuck around for generations. It speaks to the simple idea that a mother's instincts, experience, and deep emotional bond often give her a kind of quiet, behind-the-scenes wisdom, especially when it comes to her children. From the earliest years, mothers tend to be the ones closely observing their child's habits, moods, and struggles. That kind of day-to-day exposure builds a unique perspective. She may not always explain it in technical terms, but she often picks up on things before anyone else does, whether it's a shift in behavior, an unspoken worry, or a decision that just doesn't feel right. The phrase also reflects the trust many people place in maternal guidance. It's not about perfection. Mothers get things wrong, but there's a long history of them being the default voice of caution, reason, or care, not because they're always right, but because they've often had to balance emotional insight with practical thinking. Whether it's reminding you to carry a jacket, questioning your choice in friends, or suggesting a different path entirely, it usually comes from lived experience. That doesn't mean every mother is automatically wise, or that her advice is always applicable. But the saying endures because in many cases, her intuition has proven useful. She's watched how things play out, learned from past outcomes, and developed a sense for when something might go wrong, or when it might turn out better than you think. Mother knows best isn't a universal truth. It's a cultural nod to the idea that some forms of wisdom come from care, consistency, and attention. And often, those forms show up in places that don't look like authority. They look like home. A woman's place is in the home. For much of modern history, one phrase echoed through households, classrooms, and even government policies. A woman's place is in the home. Today, it sounds outdated, and for good reason, but it wasn't always seen that way. This idea came from a time when societies were built around strict divisions of labour. Men were expected to earn a living outside, while women were expected to manage everything inside. Cooking, cleaning, raising children. These roles weren't just personal choices. They were social expectations, often presented as a woman's natural duty. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, this belief was reinforced by religion, education, and the media. Advertisements praised the perfect housewife. Schools taught girls how to sew and serve, not how to lead or build. And jobs available to women were limited, poorly paid, and usually ended the moment they got married. The result? Generations of women were boxed into domestic life, even if they had the talent or desire to do something else. This wasn't about preference, it was about control. It preserved a power structure where men made decisions and women supported them silently. But things began to shift. The world wars brought women into factories and offices. Education opened doors that had been shut. And by the 1960s, the idea that a woman belonged only in the home started to unravel. Today, many still choose to focus on family, and that's valid. But the key difference now is choice. The phrase, "a woman's place is in the home," is no longer seen as a rule. It's a relic, a reminder of how far society has come, and how much further it still can go. If you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. At some point, most people have felt the need to be accepted when they're not at their best. That's where this idea comes from. The belief that real connection isn't just about celebrating someone's high points, but also sticking around when things get messy. The phrase, "if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best," is often used to defend someone's difficult moments or behaviour. It suggests that loyalty and support should be unconditional, not just dependent on how pleasant or easy a person is to be around. On the surface, that sounds fair. Nobody is perfect all the time, and expecting constant composure or positivity can be unrealistic. But it gets more complicated when this idea is used to excuse harmful behaviour. The line between being imperfect and being toxic isn't always clear. Losing your temper occasionally isn't the same as being consistently cruel. Forgetting something important now and then isn't equal to ongoing neglect. The key difference lies in effort and accountability. Struggling is human. Refusing to improve or expecting others to tolerate repeated damage. That's where the logic breaks down. In healthy relationships, Whether romantic, platonic, or professional, support should go both ways. People should be allowed to have bad days without fear of being abandoned. But that doesn't mean their actions carry no weight. There's a difference between asking for empathy and demanding blind tolerance. So while the idea aims to promote acceptance and patience, it can easily be misunderstood or misused. Supporting someone at their worst doesn't mean tolerating anything. It means understanding when someone's struggling and seeing that they're trying to do better. That effort is what makes the best part meaningful in the first place. Quitters never win. Quitters never win is a phrase most people hear early in life, often on sports fields, in classrooms, or during moments of struggle. It's meant to reinforce a simple message: persistence pays off. At its core, the idea is about sticking with a challenge long enough to see results. Winning, in this context, doesn't always mean coming in first or achieving perfection. It means reaching your goal, whatever that may be. And the argument is that you can't reach that goal if you stop halfway. It's like leaving a race before the finish line and expecting a medal. This mindset shows up everywhere. A student failing a few tests but still working toward graduation. A small business owner pushing through slow sales to eventually find their market. Even someone in recovery, rebuilding piece by piece. These are not flashy overnight success stories, but they're real examples of people who could have quit and didn't. Still, the phrase isn't about blind persistence. Not every situation is worth sticking with. Sometimes quitting is strategic, like leaving a toxic job or walking away from a bad investment. But that's not the type of quitting the phrase refers to. The idea targets the habit of giving up because something feels hard, boring, or frustrating. It's about the impulse to stop not because you've thought it through, but because the discomfort is immediate. Long-term goals usually require short-term struggle, and when the reward feels far away, it's easy to want out. But pushing through those stretches is often what separates those who achieve something from those who almost did. The message isn't that winners never fail. It's that they don't stop trying when it gets inconvenient. They keep moving, even slowly, toward the finish line. Laughter doesn't solve everything, but in the moment, it can make things feel a little lighter. That's the basic idea behind the phrase, laughter is the best medicine. It means humor has a unique way of helping people cope, not by curing illnesses, but by changing how we experience them. On a basic level, laughter is a physical response. It releases endorphins, reduces stress hormones like cortisol, and can even relax the muscles. That's not a metaphor. Those effects have been studied. When people laugh, their heart rate slows down after, their blood pressure drops, and their mood often improves. So while it's not a replacement for actual medicine, it does have a measurable impact on well-being. But the phrase goes deeper than biology. It's also about perspective. In difficult situations, people often feel stuck or overwhelmed. Laughter breaks through that tension. A joke, a funny story, or even a shared moment of silliness can give someone enough space to breathe and reset. It doesn't erase the problem, but it changes the emotional climate. This is why humor is common in places where things are otherwise serious: hospitals, support groups, even war zones. People instinctively reach for laughter because it gives them a moment of control. A sense that, even if everything around them is heavy, they don't have to be crushed by it. And importantly, laughter is social. It brings people together, builds connection, and creates a shared experience. Even watching a comedy show or movie with others can be enough to lift a mood or spark a sense of relief. So when people say laughter is the best medicine, they're not suggesting it can cure disease. They're saying it helps, sometimes more than we expect, simply by reminding us that it's okay to feel okay, even in the middle of something hard. Inspiration is not perishable. Many people believe that inspiration is a fleeting spark, something you have to seize instantly, or it slips away forever. This idea pushes us to act the moment motivation hits, fearing that if we delay, the chance will vanish. But inspiration isn't as fragile or perishable as it seems. Inspiration is better understood as a recurring resource than a one-time event. It comes and goes in waves, influenced by mood, environment, and experience. You might feel energized by an idea today, lose focus tomorrow, and then reconnect with the same spark weeks or even months later. Creativity and motivation don't operate on a strict expiration date. Rushing to act immediately can backfire. Acting impulsively without preparation might lead to poor decisions or burnout. Sometimes, taking time to reflect, research, and develop an idea makes the eventual effort stronger and more sustainable. Research in psychology shows that creativity thrives in cycles. Periods of intense focus often alternate with rest and incubation. During breaks, your brain continues to process ideas subconsciously, setting the stage for fresh inspiration later. So stepping away from a project doesn't kill your motivation. It can refresh it. Moreover, forcing yourself to act when uninspired often results in frustration or abandoned projects. Real progress happens when inspiration is met with readiness and planning, not pressure. The myth that inspiration must be acted on immediately can make people anxious or guilty for not jumping in right away. Instead, recognizing inspiration as a renewable, flexible force can help you work more thoughtfully. Inspiration isn't perishable. It's a resource you can return to, nurture, and grow over time. Waiting for the right moment to act isn't wasted time. It's often the key to success. Comfort zones prevent growth. We often hear that real growth happens only outside your comfort zone. That to improve, you must constantly push yourself into unfamiliar and uncomfortable situations. While this advice sounds motivating, it oversimplifies the complex relationship between comfort and growth. Comfort zones aren't just cozy bubbles where nothing happens. They are essential spaces where we consolidate skills, recover energy, and build confidence. Growth isn't about perpetual discomfort. It's about balance. Stepping outside your comfort zone can spark learning. Yes, but always pushing beyond it risks burnout, anxiety, and diminished performance. Growth often requires time spent practicing and mastering skills within a familiar, safe environment before tackling new challenges. Think of an athlete who trains consistently before attempting a tougher competition. Without that steady base, sudden leaps can lead to injury or failure. Psychologists highlight the concept of the optimal anxiety zone. This is where challenges are enough to motivate, but not so overwhelming that they cause stress or withdrawal. Growth thrives in this sweet spot, which sometimes lies just at the edge or even inside the comfort zone. Moreover, comfort zones evolve as we grow. What once felt safe can become limiting, encouraging gradual expansion rather than constant pushing. Healthy development respects individual differences. Some people need more stability before they can take risks, while others thrive on frequent change. The message that you must always force yourself beyond comfort can create unnecessary pressure and guilt. True growth is a dynamic process, blending exploration with rest, challenge with familiarity. In short, comfort zones don't prevent growth. They nurture it. Knowing when to push and when to pause is the real key to sustainable personal development.